I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is Spider-Man the greatest movie ever made?
Cash money for a picture of Spider-Man. He doesn't want to be famous, and I'll make him infamous.
Welcome back, true believers, to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
A show movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. Excelsior! I'm David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host and guy who, I've got you for 2 hours! 2 hours of playtime! Justus Burkett.
Yes, that's me. David, I set your levels and then I didn't realize you were going to be yelling like Stan Lee and Macho Man Randy Savage.
I didn't either.
So, if you clipped it all, that's why. We're nerding out this week on the show, and not in the same way as we nerded out on the Dune episodes, because Dune is like, adult science fiction. Today we're diving into some baby shit. But I don't want to offend anybody, because we'll get to it when we talk about the movie. But I enjoy some baby shit sometimes.
Yeah.
The stuff that is family friendly and for kids is something that I can enjoy. I just generally don't. So if I sound like I'm being derogatory about like superhero movies in general or like family entertainment in general, it's just because it's not my genre, and that doesn't mean that there is nothing in this genre that I like or appreciate. Just most of the time, it's not for me.
Yeah, and the Raimi Spider-Man films hold a special place in my heart as well. And I'm probably a little bit more into superhero movies than you are. But
almost everybody is, it seems like.
Yeah,
because they've had, obviously, as everyone who has been cognizant and within traveling distance of a movie theater is aware, superhero movies have been an omnipresent, dominating box office force for like over a decade at this point. So I often feel like I'm in the minority in not going to see these things and enjoying them or appreciating them really at all. It's a genre that I've dipped my toe into. It's not something that I have historically enjoyed a ton, and it's not something that I go out of my way to see, even when they're like all that's playing in movie theaters, like they have been for a couple of the most recent years.
I really like superhero media in general. And I say like because I used to love this stuff. And
Yeah.
I think just the oversaturation of it in the last few years, especially from Marvel, releasing Avengers Endgame and then just deciding to churn out a bunch of shit that's really low effort and disposable, which they were doing before that, to be fair. Like that they definitely were doing that. There was kind of an epidemic of okay movies, and it was like just good enough to bring people to the theater and make some money, but nothing that really left a lasting impression.
Yeah, to keep the Marvel machine going.
Right.
Yeah.
I have not been interested in them. You can fucking miss me on anything DC puts out that isn't related to Batman or directed by Matt Reeves.
Yeah, I haven't seen a single second of, I think, any DC character movie other than the 3 Nolan Batmans, and then I've caught some of the Burton Batmans in spots like on TV and stuff, but I don't think I've even seen any of those ones front to back. So DC is like totally unexplored territory for me. I don't even think I've ever seen like the Christopher Reeve Superman movie all the way through. Like, again, that's one I think I caught some of on TV.
Yeah. I think I've seen that all the way through once, but I haven't seen the other Superman movies.
Yeah.
And actually, my favorite superhero is Batman.
Yeah.
I really got into Batman, especially with the Nolan movies and then the Arkham video games. And I was buying Batman comics, many of which I still have, for years. And Spider-Man is interesting because I loved these movies as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never read a single Spider-Man comic.
Okay, so weirdly by contrast, Spider-Man is the only superhero that I've ever read comic books about. I was a big Spider-Man kid, in large part due to these movies, the first of which we'll be talking about today, right? And after that, I got into Spider-Man comics a little bit, like not to the degree that I wouldn't even call myself a comic fan. I dabbled in comics, but it was always Spider-Man for me because he is my favorite superhero. He always has been. No other superhero has really clicked with me, sort of at all, except for Spider-Man. And I think that one of the things about him, and one of the reasons that that he like got me to pick up comic books, is like he's the everyman, right?
Right.
And this is not a novel observation about Spider-Man. Everybody says this about Spider-Man, but he's the superhero who's just like, yeah, he's like, saving people. He's the crime fighting hero of New York or whatever. But also he's just like a guy who has to like try and maintain relationships with like his aunt and try and like deal with his love life and also struggle to pay his rent, and like get his assignments done on time and like make like he has to like also have a job, right? So and he's juggling all of that, and it's being Peter Parker and being Spider-Man sucks. Like it's not fun, and he fails a lot in his personal life because he is Spider-Man, right? And that's always been something that even as a kid, I think the relatability of that, where it's like, yeah, if you want to make a difference in the world, be a force for good and help people, it's not going to be fun or easy or comfortable. It's gonna suck, right? And that's kind of always the thing with him that I've been drawn to.
Yeah, there's a human element to Spider-Man
Yeah.
that I find relatable. And one of the things I love about him is he loves being a superhero.
Yes.
Like he loves doing it. He, every superhero has this drive to be a superhero. For some, like Batman, it's like the thing he has to do.
Right.
For Spider-Man, it's the thing he wants to do because he loves doing it and he loves helping people.
Yes. Even though I said it sucks being Spider-Man, it's also cool as hell to be Spider-Man, which is kind of the push and pull of the character, and I think that that's represented really well in Raimi's movies.
I think these movies represent them really well. I do not like those fucking Andrew Garfield movies. I rewatched those.
Spider-Mans?
I rewatched those recently. Those are not good.
Yeah. No.
And for the Tom Holland ones, I think in the first one, Spider-Man: Homecoming, that's really represented pretty well too. And even in the Spider-Verse movies, of course we're dealing with a different character, but there is that similar dynamic of like, I love that Spider-Man is the hero who will just save a cat out of a tree.
Yep.
And help an old lady cross the street.
Yep.
And in a universe of or in a current media landscape of superheroes fighting multi-dimensional aliens
there's always
for 3 hours,
there's always
it's
a
like
big beam in the sky that's gonna end the world.
Yeah,
somehow.
fighting a bunch of CGI gleeplops at the end.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice to have a section in this movie.
Yeah.
Which I mean, well, we haven't really talked about the movie yet, but
Yeah.
there's a part in this movie where Spider-Man just saves people from a burning house.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, so we launched right into Spider-Man. I did not ask you how you are.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
We should do that. How are you, David?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I've had a bit of a weird week.
Yeah.
Some stressful things were going on at work, and found it difficult to get to the gym. But today I'm a little tired from staying up late watching movies last night, and a big workout that I did this morning. But I'm feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
Media recommendations would be the movie Drive Away Dolls, directed by one of the Coen brothers. I don't remember which one. Apparently people don't like it. Those people are wrong. It's fun as hell.
Is this the like gay crime movie?
Yes.
Yeah. I saw a trailer for it and I thought it looked interesting, but I haven't given it a watch.
Yeah, it left theaters this week, so I watched that, and then I snuck into Madam Web afterwards.
I'm assuming you're not recommending Madam Web.
No. I don't want to say too much about Madam Web because maybe that'll come up at the end of the year.
Perhaps it will. Yeah.
How are you doing, Justus?
I'm okay. It's been like a weird end to the week, most of my week was fine. I, like you, was struggling to get to the gym this week, but otherwise it's been okay. Just kind of my regular routine. But I did find out that a dear, close family friend who I've known for quite a while passed away, and I don't I'm not gonna like say names or anything because like I don't necessarily know if that's appropriate on the pod, but I wanted, in the spirit of, we always try and make these check-ins really honest and sincere.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of that, I did just want to say that, it's hard and I'm sad. And you and also our listeners, I would just encourage you to hold your loved ones close. Let people who you love know that you love them. Because sometimes, like this situation, these things happen very suddenly. And I think it's important that the people who we love know how we feel about them and feel held and feel appreciated by us. Because you never know. This life is short and sometimes cruel. And what we have is each other. And I've been thinking about that a lot in the last 24 hours since I got that news. So, yeah, I don't know. It's been weird because, like, other than that, my week's been okay. And I wasn't super close with this person, but he was definitely a big presence in some chapters of my life. So it's been weird, and I've been sad, but I'm doing okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of my friends have been losing people close to them very suddenly recently.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't take people for granted. It's easy to do that sometimes. We have to let people know how much we appreciate them and love them while they're here.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm here if you need someone to talk to about it.
I appreciate that. I was actually really looking forward to doing the pod record today because I thought it was going to cheer me up. So you are here for me. And all of our listeners are also here for me. But yeah, thanks. Anyway, sorry, that was a downer. And now we have to go back to talking about Spider-Man. But we might as well do that because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. We both sort of hinted earlier when we were talking pre-check-in about it that this movie loomed large in our childhoods.
Yeah, this was, as a kid, my favorite movie that I had never seen.
Yeah.
Because it was in third grade, and my friend Jesse, who I don't remember his last name, wasn't really friends with him afterwards. Hope that kid's doing well, wherever he is.
Yeah.
Jesse and I loved Spider-Man, but I hadn't seen Spider-Man yet. And he saw it before me and loved to gloat at me about it. And my parents were and still are Catholic. They were much more Catholic at the time.
Yeah.
In some ways. So my dad went to see this without me to check.
Yes.
And
evaluate the content.
Yes. When Willem Dafoe got stabbed by his own glider at the end, he was like, "Nope, my son ain't seeing that."
It was that and not Kirsten Dunst's nipples.
Oh, apparently not.
Which are also in this movie.
Yeah. So I didn't see this until I was a little bit older and probably before Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
I know that we saw Spider-Man 3 in the theaters because my dad was complaining about it on the way out. But yeah, this movie loomed large for me. The video games loomed large for me too. Spider-Man 2 on the GameCube. I played that all the time. And not a very good video game in terms of like the combat and the controls, but I had a ton of fun swinging around New York City.
Yeah. So my experience with Spider-Man is probably somewhat similar in that this was kind of a big event when I was like 9 when this movie came out. But I did see it right away. I have a very distinct memory of seeing this movie in the theater. I was immediately obsessed with it. I remember being awed by it. And also, I think I was a sensitive 9-year-old, and some of the things in this movie scared the shit out of me. This was a movie that I loved, but also, I think I told this anecdote maybe on our very first episode, definitely on an early episode, where the scene where Willem Dafoe transforms into the Green Goblin, like where he takes the performance enhancers in this movie, in the theater, I remember watching it through my fingers. I had my hands over my face because I was so scared of what was happening. And I was like watching, like barely peeking through my fingers. But then we got this movie on DVD, and it was on heavy rotation in our house. This is probably one of the movies I have seen the most times in my life, despite the fact that before watching it for this episode, I probably hadn't seen it in at least 15 years. But it's probably one of the most watched movies for me, period, because as soon as we got that DVD, it was on all the time, right? And even then at home, I would, when we'd be watching it, because I would want to watch this movie, I'd put it on. And anytime the Green Goblin was on screen, I would go into my parents' bathroom, which is the farthest room in my parents' house from where the TV is, and hide in the bathroom with my hands over my ears, because I was so scared of seeing or hearing. Not anytime the Green Goblin was on screen, but like there were some specific moments. The transformation sequence always scared me. The part where there's like a little jump scare of his face at one point in this movie, I always knew that was coming, and I would run away for that. But like suffice to say, Willem Dafoe was the boogeyman of my childhood for a little bit. Anyway, so big, huge presence in my childhood, left an enormous impression on me. So yeah, that's why I picked this for this week's episode, is because it's a movie that that has loomed incredibly large in my life, and that I hadn't revisited in over a decade. And I was like, I wonder how Spider-Man 2002 holds up now. Like, I wonder what going back to that movie is going to be like.
Yeah.
So,
because I watched 2 probably more than 1. Because of course at the time 2 was like the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. And 3, I think I'm positive I only saw it in the theater that one time. And I think before the last Tom Holland one, Spider-Man No Way Home. I think before that came out, I rewatched these, and then the Garfield ones. And there was my second time seeing Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
And also my first time watching this one in a while, but that was a few years ago. So I was also wondering, because my tastes have changed pretty drastically, I think, over the last few years.
Yeah.
I was wondering how my opinion on this would change, because I also got much more into Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
As a director.
Yes.
And it's great that you brought up like how the Green Goblin would scare you, because there's a lot of Raimi in this. There's a lot of horror elements sprinkled throughout this, and especially in the second one with like the Dr. Octopus hospital scene and shit.
Yes. By the way, I did watch Spider-Man 2 this morning, because after watching Spider-Man 1 last night, I was like, I want to watch Spider-Man 2. So I'm fresh off a Spider-Man 2 rewatch as well. And you're right. Like, the Raimi of it all is so fucking important to these movies. I think. So this was a movie that was in development hell for like decades. Like, they wanted to make a Spider-Man movie in like the late 80s or early 90s. Like, this got greenlit, right? And like tons of different directors were attached. Some of our faves. Tobey Hooper was attached for a hot second.
Yeah, I know.
James Cameron was attached, with Leo DiCaprio in talks to star, which that would have been a totally different movie, right? Like, sorry, you were going to.
No, I was going to say, Canon Films was going to do it, because they had the rights to Marvel, because Marvel was just like going bankrupt in the 80s, and they were just selling stuff off like crazy. So Albert Pune was going to do Spider-Man, and then
Spider-Man,
and then as Canon sort of went on the decline, they had to sell it.
Yeah, but like, this is, you can go down so many rabbit holes. This is like it's like a bottomless pit of film history lore on this movie. There is so much that you can dig into in the production of this movie, all the different people who were attached to direct, to star. It is truly one of those Hollywood projects where it's just like, oh, everybody you've ever heard of was attached to this at some point. So to talk about Sam Raimi for a little bit, we're both fans of Sam here.
Yeah, you more so than me.
Although, when I say I'm a fan of Sam Raimi, I don't want to mischaracterize it, because Sam Raimi has done a lot of work in genres outside of the superhero action film and horror. He has done some crime movies. He's done some like dramas, you know. I haven't seen every Sam Raimi movie. I haven't even seen most Sam Raimi movies. It's just that of the Sam Raimi movies I have seen, which mostly consist of the Evil Dead franchise and his Spider-Man franchise, although I've also seen Drag Me to Hell. There might be one or two more sprinkled in there that I'm forgetting, but like that's most of it, right? The reason that he still is one of my favorite directors, even though I still have a lot of his filmography to explore, is because I love a few things about Sam Raimi. There are two things that I want to call out especially. I love that he treats the camera like a toy, right? He throws it around, he ties it to things. He loves to make the camera kinetic. He is such a kinetic filmmaker.
Yeah.
Motion is so important to him.
And that all comes from shooting Evil Dead for nothing.
Yes.
And like trying to figure out all of these camera tricks and stuff that he could do, where it's like, okay, I don't have the money to buy a Steadicam. Let's just put the camera on a 2x4 and run through the woods with it.
Yes. He has such command of the audience's sense of space, right? Where he is the perfect person to make an action movie about a guy who has superpowers and can move in ways that no human can move, because he already fucking does that in his other movies. And the other thing that I wanted to call out about Raimi, and one of the reasons that he's one of my favorites, he has a sick, delightful, sadistic sense of humor as a director. He is gleefully mean, and I think in Evil Dead that comes through in a huge way, and is one of the reasons that his first Evil Dead movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. But it comes through in Spider-Man as well, right? In his Spider-Man series. This is so much meaner, and like he's just such a little shithead. Raimi is, right? Even though the movie is very sincere and I think has a lot of heart to it, there's this undercurrent of like kind of this perverse glee, laughing at misfortune befalling people, right? And I'll call out those moments more like as they happen in the movie, but like I feel like that's one of the things that makes me love his movies so much, is that without feeling like he's doing edgelord shit, he feels like he is pushing the envelope, right? On what he's allowed to get away with in the stories that he tells. And in the horror genre, like it doesn't feel that way as much, but here it kind of does. It kind of feels like, hey, this is a family film, but like, how far can I take this family film?
Yeah. Well,
you know?
and I've seen the Evil Dead movies. I've seen this, and I've also seen his Doctor Strange movie. I'm not as big of a Raimi head as you are, but I did a huge 180 on Evil Dead when I rewatched them recently. And, previously I was a little bit negative on them when I saw them when I was younger. And now I really, really enjoy those movies. And I think regardless of what I'm going to say about this movie for the rest of the show, the best thing about this movie is that it is distinctly a Sam Raimi film.
Yes.
And that is so refreshing in especially in 2024 when superhero movies have just kind of become slop, and corporations like Disney and Warner Brothers just hire independent directors fresh off of a successful independent movie that they can bully and boss around and mutilate their product without any sort of repercussions.
Right.
And they just all feel kind of empty and hollow and mass produced. Even I would say Raimi's Doctor Strange movie, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what I heard, is they sort of took a little bit of the Sam out of it.
Yeah, it takes a while for Sam to show up, and then like those last 30 minutes, like, okay, there's Sam. That's who I was here to see.
Yeah.
So I think, despite everything, what makes this movie special, and its sequel, and for some people, Spider-Man 3.
I didn't talk about Spider-Man 3, but just very, very briefly, that movie I have also seen a shit ton of times. We had the full trilogy on DVD. I'm like not a defender. I'm not like one of those people who's like, no, that movie is a masterpiece actually, and you just read it wrong. But that is a movie that I still remember enjoying and would be interested in revisiting. And since I already just watched 1 and 2, maybe I'll get back to it soon. It might be on the docket.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's his voice as a director shines through all of these.
Yeah.
And I think the third one is a bit of a mess.
Well, but some of that comes down to studio interference
for sure
as well.
Yeah.
That's sort of where it started for him. And Sam Raimi is one of those guys where the bigger budget he has, kind of the less happy it seems like he was working on the movie. That has sort of been a thing that's come up with him a little bit, and it's also sort of a thing that's consistent with some of my favorite directors, like Carpenter has also like kind of. But Raimi is like he's one of those guys where it's like he's got these weird ideas that sound like on paper they're not gonna work, right? And once you get a shit ton of studio money tied up in that and the producers become more involved, right? It becomes harder to sell those ideas than if you have a tiny budget and nobody's really paying attention to what you're doing, right? And it's like he is sort of a creative genius though, right? So if you kneecap his weird ideas that sound crazy and shitty on paper, you end up with a worse movie because he knows what the fuck he's doing, you know? So let's talk about Spider-Man 2002, directed by Sam Raimi.
And man, there is just something about this title sequence.
Oh my god!
Okay, I guess we should talk about Danny Elfman's score.
Okay.
Because that was the first note I have.
Yes.
This score is great.
Yes.
And it gets you immediately hyped for the movie, and I remember it like note for note for note.
I think Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's just, they seem like such a natural fit for each other. Raimi's kinetic kind of Three Stooges slapstick direction and Danny Elfman's score seamlessly are integrated throughout the runtime of this thing. There are so many times when someone like gets punched or Peter like puts his hand on the wall the first time he's doing the wall crawl, and there is like a musical sting that accompanies the physical action. These two guys really, it feels like they're creatively on the same page, you know?
Yeah, Elfman's work on this reminds me a lot of his work with the Burton Batman movies, where everything you're saying, it's so integrated with the pacing and the rhythm and the movement of the film. And they both kind of have, you know, Elfman and Burton and Elfman and Raimi both kind of have the same weird dark sensibilities.
Yeah.
And they mesh really well.
Yeah.
I think, you know, obviously the Batman score I think is way more iconic than this, but I remember this theme from my childhood. It's something that I remember fondly, and this CGI intro with the font that they later used for the PlayStation 3.
I love
and the webs.
Spider-Man font. I love the CGI webs. I love that we're seeing webs and then we're seeing like veins and DNA and shit.
Yeah.
I love it so much. It's so great. And then when you do finally see something in the movie, it's Tobey Maguire chasing a school bus.
Yeah.
because this is what I'm talking about with Sam Raimi's kind of mean sense of humor, is immediately Peter Parker is the biggest loser. Like the lowest on the totem pole. He's the universe's joke.
Peter Parker has to suck.
Yeah.
And I think of the Spider-Man movies, this understands that the best.
Yeah.
It might understand it too well in places. And I think that's just because, like you said, Raimi just loves putting his actors and characters through hell.
Yes, he loves beating up his protagonists, right? I love that in this first scene, first of all, I love that there's a big fat guy on the bus eating a donut.
I love the fat guy on the bus eating the donut.
And he bites the donut and the jelly squirts out the other end of the donut.
And Peter's monologuing like, you might think that it's on Flash, and I think Mary Jane
talking about
he's
Mary
like,
Jane, and he's like, I wish that that was me next to her.
I even wish that was me, and it's the fat guy with the donut, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. And I love that once he gets on the bus, because he's chasing down the bus and eventually stops so he can get on. I love when he gets on the bus, he immediately gets something thrown at him. And then a nerdy girl with braces and glasses and the fat guy with a donut are both like, you're not sitting next to me, dork. And then he gets tripped.
Oh, and the bus driver's also laughing at him too.
Oh, yeah. Like literally nobody is on Peter Parker's side. Like for some reason, everybody has decided that this is the guy we're all gonna bully, which rocks. I think it's I think it's so fun and funny for Raimi to take this extreme of an approach to this character, where it's not like, no, yeah, he's not just a nerd. He's like, everyone at the school is actively antagonistic toward him. Like, they all hate him for some reason.
So he's going to this field trip at this science lab. We're also introduced to Willem Dafoe and James Franco pulling up in a Rolls Royce.
This fucking... Speaking of Tim Burton's Batman, it looks like the Penguin is gonna come out of this car. It is like a real Rolls Royce, right? But just, I get where Harry's coming from here, being like, Dad, you can't fucking drop me off in this car, because if I was within a half a mile of this car, I would be like, who's got the fucking rolls?
Must
like
be a supervillain.
It draws so much attention, so I understand his resistance here.
And Harry introduces Peter to him, and we get the now famous meme of I'm something of a scientist myself.
Something of a scientist myself. I love how even in this very first scene, Willem Dafoe is interacting with Tobey Maguire and is already so much warmer to him and like so much more like invested in him than he is in his own son. He wants Peter to be his son so much more than he wants his actual son to be his son.
You know, I kind of get it.
I get it too.
We'll talk about Franco, but I kind of get it.
I kind of get it too.
Can we talk about this teacher?
Yes.
This teacher who looks 5 years younger than his adult students.
Okay. Yeah. So this movie does. We talked about this a little bit in the Craft episode. This movie is a way bigger offender than the Craft was. Every single student in this high school class looks like they are pushing 40. They are not even, they don't even look like they're in their 20s. All of these people are in their 30s. And yeah, the teacher looks the same age or slightly younger.
And so they're going to the science lab. It's spiders, you know Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And
genetically engineered super spiders. They're not radioactive in this one.
And
instead it's genetic engineering.
Yeah, and Peter and Harry are talking or something like that. And this teacher comes up and he's like, the next person who talks will bear this course. I kid you not. He's so intense.
It rocks. It rocks. He's terrifying. I also love when they're about to go in. He's like, I don't want a repeat of what happened at the planetarium. And I'm like, what the fuck happened at the planetarium? Like, I want the Sam Raimi Spider-Man prequel where no Spider-Man shit happens and we just see what happened at the planetarium. But yeah, this guy is giving off outwardly hostile energy to his students. I'm like, he might be hitting students.
He only has like 4 lines, but he delivers all of them through gritted teeth.
Yeah.
And he's like, you were talking through that woman's entire presentation.
This man hates his job.
Yeah.
And will eventually be fired for putting down students' names in a little black book.
And I also love here. There's different spiders, and we get a little like these are Chekhov's spider powers that are all going to come to play later. Like, oh, this one can jump really high, and this one has super high tensile strength webs.
Yes, yes, and we I love the fucking. So MJ is on this school trip with them, and she calls out that there is one of the spiders is missing because this lady who's like leading the lab tour is like, oh, we have these 13 genetically designed super spiders, and 15 maybe, and she's like, oh, there's 14, and the the science lab lady is so chill about it. She's like, oh yeah, no, research must have that one still. Like, oh yeah, it's just off in another lab or whatever. But I like to imagine that inwardly she's panicking. She's like, oh fuck, like this is a disaster. She's like, I gotta keep my cool. I can't like cause a panic with these high schoolers. But I'm like secretly typing in the code into my little tablet here that like puts this whole thing on fucking lockdown.
Peter's a photographer for the school paper.
Yes.
He is taking pictures and he uses the opportunity to take pictures of MJ.
Yes, he goes up to her and says, hey, can I take some pictures of you for my the school paper?
I'm totally not going to jerk off to these later.
And just in case you're wondering why I specified that I wouldn't be jerking off to them, and you know, because that might make it seem like I am going to be jerking off to them, I just thought that maybe you thought that I would be jerking off to them. and I just wanted to make sure that you weren't thinking that. So like, but I'm not though gonna be jerking off to these.
And Peter's, trying to hide the boner in his pants.
Yeah, and he gets bit by a spider.
And I kind of like how the spider like relishes the moment. He's like, I'm gonna bite the fuck out of this kid for a second.
Yeah,
it's like
enjoy your spider powers, dickhead.
Takes a fucking chunk out of little Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, and then so like Peter goes home after the field trip. And we see him at home with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Actually, before he gets home, we see a little slice of life with Aunt May and Uncle Ben just kind of talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I do love. So this is Cliff Robertson.
Yeah.
As Uncle Ben and Rosemary Harris as Aunt May. Wanted to call them both out as just the heart and soul of this movie. Really, both of them. I love them both.
I think Cliff Robertson is great.
Yeah.
Controversial take here. I don't dislike Rosemary Harris. I think she's doing a good job. I was watching Attack of the Clones recently, and I hated every time Yoda was on screen because Yoda just said the stupidest, dumbest, most bullshit advice that the movie's trying to sell you is like, this is important. This is a wise old Jedi master. I feel that way about Aunt May, where she just gives the dumbest, shittiest, most worthless advice that the movie's trying to like sell to you is like, you should feel emotional.
Oh, I fully disagree. It was working for me every single time. Anytime Rosemary Harris opened her mouth, I was like, oh, what sage pearls of wisdom from this beautiful old woman, right? But anyway, I do like in the scene where you meet Uncle Ben and Aunt May, when Cliff Robertson is going through, because he's like trying to find a job. He's been laid off from his job as an electrician, and he's just like going through the want ads, and he's like, computer analyst, computer scientist. I don't know the fucking. I'm not gonna messing around with these computers. I just love a grumpy old man grumbling about computers. It's great. And then Peter comes home and he's like, I have to go to bed.
I have to go to my room and jerk off. I mean, sleep.
I took a lot of pictures of Mary Jane. But then then we get like the transformation sequence. It's again so clear that Sam Raimi made this movie.
Yeah.
Because this is the moment of our protagonist getting superpowers, right? This is a superhero origin sequence. And you see a fat, fucking gross ass, like huge welt that has developed around his spider bite on his hand. It looks gnarly as fuck. And then there's a flash effect, and there's a screaming skull for like 2 frames
on Peter's face.
On Peter's face, and then also next to it.
Yeah.
There's an additional screaming skull that pops up. And I'm like, and then you go into his body and see his DNA with like fragments out of it get replaced by neon blue and red super spider DNA. It is so stupid and so campy, and that is the point. Like, Sam Raimi's doing that on purpose, and it fucking rocks. I love it so much. I love how silly and dumb and also kind of like scary this moment is treated.
Yeah, because Elfman's score is a little bit darker here. Yeah. And with the skull, I think it's even like storming outside or something like that.
Yeah.
It's that little influence that Raimi takes from his horror movies.
Yeah.
Creeping into here.
Yeah. And then we contrast this with an additional transformation sequence, because I think we might have skipped over it.
Yeah, basically, Norman Osborn has been developing this like super soldier serum and a glider for the military.
For the world's most unimpressed general. this general who's like super decorated. His fucking jacket is just full of so many pins. So he's like, I don't even know, like the fucking chief of staff at the Pentagon or some shit. And Norman Osborn's like, hey, we got this guy who's like up on this glider, and also like, there's super soldier serum that'll turn you 500 times stronger than a regular man. And this general's like, fuck off, Norman. Like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah. And there's issues about the trials because it makes you crazy.
Yeah.
So in this scene,
that was only one trial.
Yeah.
Apart from Dr. Strom, the entire team approves human trials.
So Norman decides he's going to do it himself.
Yeah.
He takes that goblin juice.
Yes. This was the scene that terrified me as a child. rewatching it as an adult, I get why I was terrified at 9 years old. Man, I love this sequence now.
It's fun watching Willem Dafoe jump around like a spider monkey.
Yes.
I love the so he drinks the juice. He drinks juice, a juice, and then he's in like this chamber, and then the gas releases.
Okay. Also,
and then when the smoke clears, the assistant or whatever goes up. And he's like,
it's Dr. Strom, the guy who was saying that he didn't want to do the human trials, right?
He goes up. The smoke clears, and he goes, Norman, is that you? Norman, are you okay? And then Raimi does a really, really quick zoom into
like
Willem Dafoe's face as his eyes open.
Yeah.
And then Willem Dafoe.
And there's like a musical sting where it's like, whoa.
Yeah. It's like a jump scare.
Yeah.
And then Willem Dafoe just goes fucking ham and throws this doctor across the room. And
Back to formula.
formula.
I love when Willem Dafoe drinks that juice before he gets in the chamber. He tosses the glass aside and it shatters on the floor. And I'm like, man, the janitorial staff fucking hate Dr. Osborn. They're like, he's always drinking his fucking green juices, his like fucking health drink, and then he's chucking. It's like he thinks glassware is single use. This man is too rich. I'm always having to vacuum up broken glass in every single lab that he doesn't experiment in.
There's a minor detail that we can just cross off the list now because it's not that important. But when Willem Dafoe is playing Norman Osborn, he has fake teeth in.
Yeah.
That to make his teeth look straight.
Yes.
And when he's the Goblin, he just has his normal,
Willem
crooked
Dafoe
Willem Dafoe teeth
with the big gap in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that's just so fun.
Also, and I don't think it's just because of the teeth, his voice is a little different.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I think he's
yeah.
also just doing an actor thing.
Yeah, for
where
sure.
the Goblin is like a little higher, right? And then the Norman Osborn voice is more his natural speaking register, right? And I'm like, I really love that choice. That like you can even when he's not wearing the mask and he's going Goblin mode while pretending to just be Norman Osborn.
Yeah, when he's doing the like Jekyll and Hyde scenes.
Like in the Thanksgiving scene, a little bit. You can tell when it's Norman and when it's the Goblin because of how he's speaking, which I think is so fun. But yeah, so Norman Osborn has his Frankenstein experiment has gone wrong, as Frankenstein experiments are wont to. He throws Dr. Strom, which we mentioned, but then Dr. Strom hits this fucking like wheel cart full of computer equipment, and it just explodes into a shit ton of sparks, which I also love. And I did want to call out that at one point after the gas clears and like Dafoe is unconscious, Dr. Strom comes and gives him CPR, which leads me to the question: if Dr. Strom didn't give him CPR here, would he have just died?
I don't know.
Is Dr. Strom responsible for the Green Goblin's rampage because he resuscitated Norman? Anyway, so then Peter wakes up and he doesn't need his glasses anymore, and also he's more jacked. And David, Tobey Maguire looks down.
He looks down at his cock and he says, "Yep, big change."
So, did being bitten by a genetically engineered super spider make his hog bigger? That seems to be what the movie is telling us.
Mary Jane's a very lucky woman.
Although I guess she's not, because he refuses to give it up, which is the thing that we'll talk about.
He does make it out of the friend zone and then just is like, nah, I'm good.
Nah. Well, because you might be killed by a Green Goblin. What if there's another Green Goblin? Surely the odds of there being a second Green Goblin are astronomically low. That won't happen 2 movies from now. But the spider bit him and his dick is bigger, and also his eyes work. And yeah, so then he like goes to school, and this is where the Cronenberg-esque body horror movement of this film begins.
I'm glad you said Cronenberg. Justus, for years,
Yeah.
I thought that Spider-Man's webs shot out of his wrists. They came out of his fucking body because of this movie.
Right.
Which is not the case for the majority of Spider-Man comics.
No, in the comic
he's
comic
built
book,
web shooters in the other movies.
Yes, but in this movie, they just come out of his wrists. They just shoot from his body, which number one is crazy and makes no sense if you think about it at all.
Yeah.
Number two, it is actually really gross. I love the sound effect that they use for the web shots in this movie, because it simultaneously, it's like a very well designed sound where it like fits the visual, but also it sounds kind of gross. It's sort of like the thwip of like this, rope-like substance soaring through the air, but there's kind of also like a wetness to it where it's kind of like
well, yeah, and when stuff's like stuck to it and he has to peel it off,
yes,
it is like it looks like he just kind of came on over his hands.
Yes, but I like that it's gross. It kind of rocks, and I also just like that was the decision that this movie made. Is it's like, no, he's not gonna like build the web shooters. His hands just do that. It's fun.
It's fun.
And yeah, so he's at school. He's basically like he's weirded out by his transformation, right? But he's in the cafeteria, and Mary Jane like slips on a puddle, and he fucking catches her and like catches all the shit on the tray.
Which I guess they did for real.
Yes,
like that's all practical.
It took like a ton of takes.
Yeah, which is nuts.
It's crazy.
It's it's a really good moment.
Yeah, and I love her being like, "Wow, great reflexes, thanks." And then she's
you just imagine them trying to like not break character after him doing that,
right? And then she makes because they don't want to have to do it again.
Yeah.
And then I love her making the comment about his eyes and him just kind of staring at her like, and she's like, okay, so like I'm gonna go sit with my boyfriend now, right? Because he doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then he sits back down and he's like, oh, stupid. And he accidentally fucking shoots web at someone's lunch tray and it hits Flash Thompson and all that shit. And I love him leaving the lunchroom in embarrassment.
Yeah.
And the tray is still attached to his fucking wrist.
And everyone laughs at him like as if like he has toilet paper stuck to his shoe.
Right.
And no one questions what's going on.
Right. And then the lunch tray, like the lunchroom door is closed behind him and the lunch tray is just smacking the door, which then mentally conjured the image of him in the hallway tugging at his wrist trying to get it to fucking but yeah, it is weird that nobody thinks this is odd, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, that's Peter Parker always having fucking web shoot out of his body. Just like Peter fucking Parker.
But then he goes to his locker and we get the shot that you were talking about, which is the spider sense shot, which is a really good way of conveying spider sense without really talking about it or devoting any exposition to it, where the camera pans through all of these things that are happening in the hallway with like someone's throwing a paper airplane and shooting a spitball, and then it ends on Flash's fist about to hit Peter in the face with a sound effect of Flash yelling at him.
Yes, and this is Flash Thompson is played by Joe Manganiello.
Yeah,
and he's fucking hilarious in this movie. I love his performance. He is especially egregious in terms of looking like he is 40 years old while playing a high schooler. Yeah. But I love him in this fight. I love him first being very confident, and we get the classic heavily memed line, "I wouldn't want to fight me neither." I love it as the fight goes on, him getting more and more like confused and frustrated that he can't just like beat the pulp out of this dork. It's just very fun. Because, like, Peter's, like, dodging all of his shit because he's got his new Spider-Man reflexes. And eventually he punches him once in the chest and sends him flying, like, 60 feet. And I'm like, first of all, that man has multiple broken bones in his fucking torso now. And second of all, again, everybody takes this as an opportunity to continue bullying Peter. And I'm like, if I saw someone rocket a man across a hallway with a single punch, I wouldn't be like, Jesus, Parker, you are a freak to that guy immediately afterwards, because I'm like, I don't want to catch that fist next. Like, what the fuck are you thinking? But yeah, it's I like the little locker fight. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a good moment, and then this transitions to Peter training basically and like testing out his powers.
Yes.
We get, because I love at some point during the sequence the close up of his fingers, and you see the fibers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The little CGI fibers or spider feelers, whatever you want to call them. I don't
Yes,
know.
his
That
weird
allows him to attach to walls and stuff.
his weird little hairs on his fingers. He
Yeah.
has weird little barbed hairs on his fingers that make him sticky.
Yeah, it's really gross.
Yeah, again, it's like Cronenberg-esque body horror. And the super, super close-up that you were talking about is gross.
Yeah.
Like, it's uncomfortable and kind of horrific to see. And it's like, I love that this is the hero of this franchise, and we're just like, yeah, his body is full of horrific, monster mutations.
Well, this movie kind of treats it, and this goes along with kind of some of the humor or the I think like that joke about him looking down at his dick. It kind of treats his spider powers like puberty.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know that other Spider-Man stories really do that.
Yeah.
Other than just like the fact that being Spider-Man is just another part of his life as a teenager growing up and all the responsibilities he has to juggle.
Right.
But this is like, his transformation is a little bit more treated as like an allegory for going through puberty.
Right. He's growing hair in places
Yeah.
that he doesn't expect to. White stuff is shooting out of his body unexpectedly. Yeah.
But I think like stuff like him climbing up the side of the building for the first time is done really well.
Yes, I love
and
the
Elfman's
music.
score is great.
Yeah, the score in that moment as he's climbing up the wall, and then him looking down and the camera zooming in on him as he gets excited, and then he delivers the first of so many delightful Tobey Maguire woohoos in this movie. You were talking about how Spider-Man loves being Spider-Man. I think Tobey Maguire conveys that really well in
Should
this
we talk
movie.
about Tobey for a minute?
Yeah, let's talk about Tobey.
What do you think of Tobey?
So, as a kid, I felt like I loved Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I also had less of an eye for performances in general. I was like, well, he plays Spider-Man in the movie, so he's my favorite actor, right? Revisiting this, first of all, Tobey Maguire in general, I think is good, but not great. I'm not a Tobey Maguire super fan, but I am not a Tobey Maguire detractor.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the time when I have seen him, he ranges from fine to pretty good for me, right? This performance specifically, I think is sort of on the pretty good end of the spectrum. I think he is a pretty good Peter Parker and a pretty good Spider-Man. I think if I had to pick between which I think he's stronger at, because he's sort of playing two different characters, right? I think he's stronger as Peter Parker than he is as Spider-Man, but I also think his Spider-Man is good. I think when he's doing the stuff in the suit, I think his physical acting is pretty good. I think how he kind of makes his voice deeper and more confident as Spider-Man works well enough. I do find him occasionally in this movie, less in the second one, which I just watched this morning. I think he matured a little bit in the character. But in this first one, I do occasionally find him a little stilted and a little wooden. But it's excusable, and the performance, I think, is still very good, with maybe a couple scenes and a couple moments that don't work as well for me. What do you think about Tobey?
I think he's okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen Tobey in anything else other than like showing up somewhere for 2 seconds, like the hitchhiker in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I think this, as far as like a main role or a supporting role, I think this is all I've seen him in.
Did you never see Baz Luhrmann's Gatsby? Even?
No, I didn't see Gatsby.
Oh, okay, wow.
No, and I know he's done some dramatic stuff as well.
Yeah, he's in like Seabiscuit and shit.
Yeah, I haven't seen those. And in this, he's okay.
Yeah.
I think he sells Peter Parker as a loser pretty well.
Yeah.
However, he also looks like he's going to burst in tears at any moment throughout this movie.
But I kind of like that. Because I kind of like that Peter Parker is kind of always on the verge of an emotional breakdown. Especially like after Uncle Ben dies. I'm like, I think Tobey Maguire plays very well that the main thing with this version of Spider-Man, with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man specifically, is that his responsibility for Uncle Ben's death is the defining moment of his whole life, right? It's like that is the most important thing that has ever happened to him. He never stops thinking about it. And basically his entire decision to be Spider-Man and be a hero is an act of penance for being the cause of the death of Uncle Ben, right? And so I kind of like that he looks like he's always going to break down crying, because it's like, no, yeah, this guy's emotionally damaged. He's not okay.
Yeah, but there's never a moment where he feels like Spider-Man to me. Even when he's in the costume and quipping. Okay, not that there's never a moment, but it's like I don't see a clear separation between Peter and Spider-Man, which there isn't necessarily, but it's like I don't feel like there's that big of a difference. It's hard to take him seriously.
Yeah.
As Spider-Man at points, especially with some of the dialogue.
Yes. But yeah. Yes.
And
I agree with you, but I don't necessarily see that as a negative, because I think it plays into the overall camp, silly kind of tone of this movie, that you can't take Spider-Man seriously, because he shouldn't be taken seriously, because he's a fucking asshole swinging around on ropes that come out of his wrists, dressed in a bright blue and red suit. He is patently ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I just think Tobey's performance, it just pushes things a little bit too far into camp for me. And I like I like the camp in this movie. It is very campy. It still feels campy. But I have trouble connecting with Peter as a character.
Fair enough.
Because I think Tobey Maguire is just playing him so pathetic and just like a lost, like a puppy that's crying because you kicked it. Like that's what he feels like at points to me in this movie. I think all of the transformation stuff, I think he does that well. In general, I think the first half of this movie is stronger than the second half. I think the origin stuff really works for me. And then once we kind of get past it, the movie is a little bit more uneven in places.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not like a huge difference.
But I think you're right. I think that it feels the tightest in the first half. But I do love Tobey being excited about during this transformation sequence, him running across the rooftop screaming like woohoo, like I just love how much he is excited about learning that he can do this.
And I know I was just really critical of Tobey Maguire. I like him in this scene, and I really like how he plays this part where he's trying to figure out how to shoot webs.
This is one of the funniest parts of this movie.
Yeah, it is. Go, Web, go!
I love him trying all the hand gestures. He eventually figures it out, and then he swings directly into a sign.
Yeah.
At which, this is such a Raimi moment.
Yeah.
Where he swings into the sign, he like slams into it. There's like a big like oof noise, and then he slides down he like lets go of the web, slides down the front of the sign, and there's a sound like a squeegee going across glass, where he's like as he's like falling down the sign, and then it smash cuts away from that to him like showing back up at home on his bike.
I noted that too. I thought that was hilarious.
So fucking funny.
He also does like a Tarzan scream when he figures out his web swing. I forgot about that.
Also, there are so many close-ups of Tobey Maguire's face in this movie doing the ugliest faces you have ever seen, which I love. I love that so much. I love that they cast a guy who's kind of funny looking, right? Tobey Maguire is not like super classically handsome.
Sure.
He by Hollywood standards, he's kind of a regular looking guy, but I love that he sometimes makes comic book-esque faces, right? Where when he's swinging on the rope and he's like the web and he's looking terrified, he's just got this big cartoonish scream on his face. And then also later, I think to great effect, he is such an ugly crier. His face looks very weird when he cries.
Because he's always about to cry.
Right. But when the Uncle Ben thing happens later and he's crying, it's so much more effective to me because it's not this beautiful, perfect Hollywood single tear. He's like ugly sobbing. And like, it was hitting me last night when I was watching it. And it was in large part just because Tobey Maguire's face just kind of looks like a recognizable human face and is doing normal human face shit. And he's not afraid to look dumb in this movie.
Yeah. So Peter gets home. He lives next door to Mary Jane, and they talk in the backyard After Mary Jane storms out of her
Yes.
house because of her deadbeat piece of shit dad.
Really, truly, almost just exactly Nancy's stepdad from last week's episode, The Craft. We're not going to do a whole separate disgusting shit. People watch
Yeah.
unless you want to.
No, he's not. I mean, he doesn't have. He's not even on screen that much.
He's
You
very,
just-
yeah.
He's mostly you just hear him yelling.
But it is truly kind of the same character where he's like, "Oh, you fucking bitch, you're just like your fucking mother. Go take out the fucking garbage."
yeah,
Ah!"
yeah.
Yeah, and so then I do really like Kirsten Dunst in this scene. We can talk about, because this is kind of like the first big Mary Jane scene.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Kirsten Dunst in this movie in general?
I like her.
Yeah.
I think she's one of the stronger actors in this movie.
Yeah.
I hate Mary Jane. I hate the writing for Mary Jane.
Okay. All right.
But I think she's good. And in general, I like Kirsten Dunst. She's incredible in season 2 of Fargo.
Yes, she really is.
And I'm looking forward to. I know there's been a lot of like people discourse about Alex Garland's new movie Civil War. But she's in that, and I would see it for her.
Yeah.
And I also like Garland as a director, but
Yeah.
yeah, she's good, and I think she's good in this movie. From what I remember, she's good in the other ones. I think Mary Jane just kind of sucks.
In this movie, I think she does the best with what she's given, and I think she, even in both this movie and in 2, I think she takes the time between the lines when the character's not saying anything to tell us more about the character than is actually given in the script.
I think
she's a great actress.
Yeah, I think she has a few really good moments, and I think throughout these movies, there are a couple of those like backyard conversations that they have.
Yeah,
those are some of the best scenes.
Yeah.
from these movies.
Yeah. Around here, we also check back in with the Green Goblin. And that fucking general, that super decorated general guy, is going to like the fucking rival company. Because like Oscorp, like Norman Osborn's company, is like a defense contractor, right? And so this general is like going to this other defense contractor who's like a competing business and checking out their fucking exoskeleton pod suit that they're demoing.
Yeah.
Which looks like it's something out of one of the Alien movies. and then the Green Goblin shows up and blows the bunker and the exoskeleton and everything the fuck up, which is hilarious because it's literally, this scene is like 45 seconds long. It's literally like we check back in with the general. He has another dig against Norman Osborn where he's like, I want to put that guy out of fucking business. You see this cool exoskeleton suit? Huge explosion, graduation caps.
Yeah. I think it happens a little bit later.
Yeah,
but,
you're right.
But it's fine. We don't have to mention it
Whatever.
later now. Because next is Peter coming up with ideas for his costume and then going to the wrestling match.
You're right.
Yeah. But I really like this montage of him drawing different logos and different ideas for the costume and the way the movie, you're seeing them on screen behind Peter as he draws and stuff like that.
Yes, I know Peter wants to be a scientist and also has a passion for photography, but if Peter Parker was so inclined, he does have a very promising career in costume design.
He's a good artist too. The drawings are really good.
Yes, his costume sketches are really good, which is a great skill to have as a costume designer. Or yeah, he could just be a visual artist, I guess. But also we later find out, because when he does his wrestling version of the Spider-Man suit, it's basically just like a t-shirt that he screen printed and then like a red ski mask. But then we find out, and it's called out specifically textually in Spider-Man 2, he made the actual Spider-Man suit that he wears for the rest of the movies. Like, apparently he just, he's got great cosplay skills. Peter Parker would be a great cosplayer too. In addition to a great costumer, yeah, he would fucking nail conventions.
Yeah.
Because it looks incredible. It looks like a Hollywood costume designer made it. And apparently it was this high school guy in his room who has no money.
I love the costume.
It's great.
I think it's great.
It's so good.
And it's so nice compared to the Tom Holland movies where he's CGI the whole time.
Yeah.
Obviously there's points where he's CGI in this for sure,
Yeah.
but like a lot of times it's just Tobey Maguire or a stunt guy in
that
this
suit
costume,
that they made.
and it looks good.
It looks great. I love the like raised webs on it. I love the big spider logo on the chest. I love the eyes on it.
The eyes are good.
They're big. They're expressive. They're kind of like mirrored a little bit. So sometimes you'll see a little bit of like what's around him when you're in a close up on his head, which is kind of a cool effect. Yeah, it's a great suit design. Looks awesome.
I also love the wrestling suit.
Yes,
which is our next scene here. So basically, Peter gets a ride to the library because Uncle Ben has been noticing he's been acting weird lately. He wants to talk to him, and this is when Uncle Ben delivers, with great power comes great responsibility, and and Peter tells him to go fuck himself.
I love that. That's his reaction.
Yeah.
To that line, because it's like that's the line.
Yeah,
from Spider-Man, right. And I love that the way this movie treats it is it's like this is like sage advice from Uncle Ben. He's trying to like break through to who he sees as like his nephew, who's a good kid but is going through like a troubled time, right? And I like that Peter's just basically like, you don't understand what's going on with me, like I don't need this shit, and also you're not my father, fuck off, you know.
And Cliff Robertson is one of the better performances in this movie, I think, and delivers this scene very well. And I even like after, Peter tells him to fuck off or whatever, he's like, okay, I'll pick you up at 10.
And he looks,
he's still like, you're mad, but I still love you, and I'm gonna be here for you. I'll come back and pick you up.
And he's balancing all of that, like, okay, like you can make your own decisions, right? You can tell me to fuck off if you want to. He's balancing all of that while looking also really deeply hurt.
Yeah.
And I think he's trying to play, because Peter has the line, he says, I know, Uncle Ben says, I know I'm not your father. And Peter says, then stop pretending to be. And Cliff Robertson, from that moment till he's out of the scene, seems like he is playing like he wants to break down and cry. Like he is so hurt by hearing that from Peter. But he doesn't want to let Peter know that made him feel that way. And just the performance there, he really nails it. And it's a great time for him to nail it, because the next time we see this character, he is lying on the sidewalk dying. I think Cliff Robertson is, again, like you said, I agree. He's one of the best performances in this movie. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah. And so now we have the wrestling scene.
Yes. First of all, welcome back to the show, Octavia Spencer.
Yeah.
I forgot.
For 2 seconds.
I forgot she was in this movie. She's on screen, for like 10 seconds maybe. She fucking nails this. Octavia Spencer, great actress. I love her delivery of every single line that she has, of which there are like 4. But I especially love her little laugh when she first sees him, like, because she's checking in on all the wrestlers who are coming to fucking fight Bonesaw McGraw, and she takes one look at him and says, "There's no featherweight division here, small fry." And then she does this little laugh to herself, like, and man, Octavia Spencer's great. She's barely in this movie, but she showed up and I was like, oh fuck,
yeah,
because I forgot.
Bruce Campbell's great.
Oh man,
because Raimi loves putting Bruce Campbell, and
Bruce has got to be in it
in every movie. Also Ted Raimi, who's in this movie later.
Yeah.
Bruce Campbell's playing the ring announcer.
He's so funny,
and I love when he's announcing Peter's about to come out, and he's like, "What's your name, kid?" And Peter's like, "The human spider." He's like, "Really?
That sucks."
And he basically gives him his name.
Yes,
Spider-Man.
I love that Sam Raimi chose to have Bruce Campbell christen Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I also love right before that when he's doing his wrestling MC thing into the mic and looking out at the crowd, but also backing up toward where Peter's gonna come out, and he misjudges the distance and kind of like backs too hard into the little like curtain or wall or thing that's sitting there, and he's like gets startled for a second. It's just a great little micro Bruce Campbell moment.
Yeah.
I love him so fucking much.
So then Peter comes out in his costume, and I love the humiliation gauntlet that he has to walk through, where all of the ring girls have microphones, and they're like basically taunting him as he walks down the walkway to the ring, and they're like, "You're gonna fucking die. Bonesaw's gonna drink your blood,
spit you out, little man." Yeah, and then he fucking goes into the ring with Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, we didn't mention, we probably should, that before this, Macho Man Randy Savage has been, we've been getting little moments of him in the ring as Peter's like been going to like get in place to wrestle him or whatever. And we have the classic Bonesaw is ready, which is great. But also just like a decent amount of Macho Man Randy Savage just doing his wrestling thing.
Yeah.
Very fun and it rocks.
Yeah, I didn't watch wrestling as a kid.
Yeah, me either.
But Macho Man's fucking awesome in this.
He rocks.
He's also insanely juiced.
He is, yeah.
Bro is like veins are popping out of this man's biceps, he looks so sweaty. It's awesome.
He looks like a penis. He
Yeah.
is that vascular. But yeah, Peter gets in the ring with him. They put the cage down, and I love Peter panicking here and being like, I didn't sign up for a cage match, because he doesn't understand that with his spider power set, this is actually an advantage for him, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then, of course, he does make a homophobic joke, which is unfortunate. The year was 2002, and so Spider-Man, the hero of this movie, is making a joke that's basically, haha, can you imagine if a big jacked guy was gay? That would be so silly. Hasn't aged particularly well, but there it is. And I really love every Macho Man delivery here. One of my favorites, it's right before the homophobic joke, is just him going, "What are you doing up there?"
Well, and after he delivers that homophobic joke, Bonesaw does hit him with a chair like 10 times, and it's pretty sweet.
Yes, yeah. So I guess he gets his payback.
Yeah.
I also like there's like the memeified version of that scene where it's respectful Spider-Man, where they change it to be like, hey, that's a cute outfit. Did your husband make it for you? And then it's Bonesaw, and he's like, well, yes, as a matter of fact, he did. He's very talented, and he's very supportive of my wrestling career. And it goes back to Spider-Man, and he's like, that's so great. I'm really happy for you. Your relationship sounds really healthy.
Yeah, I remember that name too.
But unfortunately, that's not what happens. Instead, it's just homophobic.
And then Spider-Man kicks him into the cage.
Yes.
To win.
Yes.
Like, and I think he even like flips over or something.
Yeah.
It's pretty sick.
Yeah, and the choreography here is awesome in this scene. I think this is like weirdly one of the best fight scenes of the movie is
I think
him
so.
and Bonesaw.
I think it's one of the best scenes in general in the movie.
I agree. This scene is definitely a high point. But I will say throughout the movie, I think overall the action in this movie is pretty good. This is just maybe one of the highlights, right?
Yeah, and it's also, I think it's just Raimi on 10.
Yeah.
Like between Bruce Campbell and Macho Man going crazy, and there's a bit of that sadistic streak in this scene.
No, at one point, one of the ring girls who was negging Peter on his way into the ring hands Macho Man a fucking crowbar and says, "Kill him!"
Well, and I love the crowd too. The crowd all have signs that they're holding up, and one of them is like, "Kill him!" or "Tear him apart."
They literally, the whole crowd starts chanting, "Kill him! Kill him!"
And they're even doing bone saw, and they have like saws that they're sawing their arms with.
Bone saw signs too. So anyway, he beats Macho Man here.
Yeah.
He wins. And instead of getting his $3,000, the most New York man who has ever existed only gives him $100. I don't know who this actor is. I fucking love this guy.
I think every New York extra in this movie is the most New York person that has ever lived.
Yeah, it's true. This is a really, which by the way, a lot of this was filmed on location in New York.
Yeah.
A lot of those shots have already happened, but they continue throughout the runtime. Some of it was on studio stages, like sound stages, and some of it was on location in California, some of it was shot in California. But the New York stuff, I think, is indispensable to this movie. I think how much of New York you actually get to see in this movie is really important to it working, because New York sort of feels like a character in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for Spider-Man specifically.
Yeah, I think that's important for Spider-Man in general.
Yeah.
The same way that I think Gotham is for Batman.
Right. The location has to feel like part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Raimi does a good job of capturing that, that New York spirit and why Spider-Man works so well as a hero in New York.
Yes. And as part of capturing that New York spirit, he does have a lot of New York extras, like this fucking guy who is refusing to pay Peter the full 3,000. I fucking just something about this dude I'm obsessed with. I love Peter being like, "Oh, the ad said 3,000," and he's like, "Check it again, webhead. It said $3,000 for 3 minutes, and you pinned him in 2. For that, I give you 100."
That was really good. I was gonna try to jump in there and join you, but at a certain point, I'm like, I think Justus has his covered.
I'm obsessed with this.
You know this movie really well.
I'm obsessed with him. He's my favorite.
I love the robber, the guy who robs him. What's going on with this man's hair? Also, what's the thought process of like, I'm going to break into a stadium that's hosting a wrestling event, force my way backstage
to like the promoter,
to the promoter, and try to rob him and get out with the money.
And then later on, when half of the NYPD is on him and there's like 2 helicopters and shit, he goes into a building and is completely surrounded and just has his gun like he's gonna take on all of these cops by himself. And I'm like, motherfucker, get out of there with your hands up or you are going to die. Like, the $3,000 was not worth this, my man. It's fucking nuts that he does not immediately be like, okay, I surrender. Because it's like, there is no way out of this. And that's even if Spider-Man didn't show up.
Yeah, this is like you're playing GTA 5. Yeah. Early in the game when you only have a pistol and suddenly you have a 5-star wanted level.
Right. This guy's at 4 stars. He's like, if he hangs out in that building for 2 more minutes and Spider-Man doesn't show up, that 5th star is happening and there's going to be a tank outside.
Yeah, they're gonna spawn a tank.
But anyway, so this robber dude, his hair, you're right.
Yeah.
Is insane.
It's very 2000s. It looks like he just came from like Ozfest or something.
Yeah, he would look at home with at Gathering of the Juggalos with this dude that he's got going on.
So he stiffs the guy, he robs the guy for his money,
yeah,
and then takes off down the hallway and where Peter's leaving, and Peter just steps aside very coldly, practically flips off the promoter.
Great moment. I love this moment of this movie so much because the morality of superhero stories by definition pretty much sort of has to be black and white, but the characters don't have to be.
Yeah.
I love that this is a moment where Peter Parker does the wrong thing and it has actual consequences that are very serious and are never undone, right?
Yeah.
It's like the man who raised him is fucking dead for the rest of these movies, and that is always a thing that is going to torture this character, and it is never a thing that he's going to fully heal from. We sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, but since this is the moment, we'll go a little bit more in depth here. It's really, really sad and really dark, and I think we both have kind of pointed out Cliff Robertson as one of the highlights of this movie. I think he plays this death scene really well.
Yeah, it's a good death scene.
And I think Tobey Maguire, this is one of the strongest moments of his performance for me in this whole movie. I already talked about him ugly crying. I love that. And I love that they don't get to say anything to each other here because Uncle Ben is like, he's been shot like through the lung, it seems like. So he can barely speak. All he says is Peter's name twice. That's all he actually says. And then all Peter says is, Uncle Ben, I'm here, Uncle Ben. And so there's not like an exchange of dialogue. They're just kind of doing it with their faces. And Uncle Ben, before he realizes that Peter is there, his face has so much pain and fear on it. And then he sees Peter and recognizes him and says his name. And he still looks like he's in pain and afraid, but he looks a little happy as well because he's like, oh, thank God there is someone here who is a friendly face, right? Because he knows he's dying. And Cliff Robertson plays that so well. I love that it's not like he doesn't fully break out of the pain and fear of the moment, but you get the tiniest bit of relief. And it's such a beautiful little moment. And it's great.
And I like how this transitions to Peter chasing down Uncle Ben's killer and how I think the movie and Tobey Maguire do a good job of carrying that emotion between these scenes.
Yeah.
Like Raimi's direction.
And Elfman's score
and Elfman's
does a lot
score
of
is
heavy
really
lifting
intense.
on that too.
Where basically Peter sees the police cars take off down the street with their sirens going, and so he follows them. And you feel that sorrow now turning into anger.
Yeah, and some of the web swinging noises, both that we've heard from him earlier, he makes vocalizations while he's web swinging.
Yeah.
Part of that is to make the character continue to seem human, because it is kind of just a CGI whatever when he's swinging through the air, and sometimes it looks good and sometimes it looks not so good. But I think part of having Tobey Maguire voiceover sounds when he's web swinging is make it continue to feel like the character and feel human. A thing that I love that they do here is his like grunts and stuff while he's web swinging in this scene. He sounds so angry. Like it sounds like he's like they're noises of like fury. Whereas before this and after this, usually when he's web swinging, he's like whooping and hollering like he's having the time of his life. And I just like even that little detail. I'm like, I love how they just tie all this shit together, where it's just a darker version of what you see multiple times in this movie is him swinging through the streets and fighting crime and like following police cars.
And his web swinging itself is a little bit more awkward and rough around the edges. He's still trying to figure it out too.
Right.
But and one moment that leads into this that I wanted to call out, because I think it really was great at conveying the momentum between scenes, is Peter runs down an alleyway and takes his shirt off to reveal his superhero costume underneath. And the camera whip pans down the alley, and he turns into a CGI digi double to then jump on the building and then run up the building or climb up the side of the building to go take off against this guy. And Elfman's score is going. And like, I think the effects in this movie are inconsistent at points for sure and dated.
It was 2002.
But doing that all in what appears to be one shot, looks really well done.
And I will say it probably was one shot, and just the digi-double is just an addition, right? Because this is something that I did read when I was reading up on the production history of this thing. There are no 100% CGI shots in this movie at all. Everything is at least footage of New York that they then put Tobey Maguire into, right? There is nothing that is just like fully created in a computer, because it was important to Sam Raimi that it look that at least something in the shot looks real, because it is real. But yeah, so he chases down the robber here, who again goes into a building which is surrounded by half of the New York Police Department.
And before he does that, one other thing I want to call out
is
he lands on top of his car.
Yes.
Because he stole Uncle Ben's car. And he starts, and the guy starts shooting at him through the car.
Yes, and he punches through the roof.
This is something that happens in, I think, every Spider-Man game after this movie.
Yeah.
So it was very, very familiar to me. I'm like, oh, yep, you got to hit triangle to dodge the first shot, and then you got to hit square to punch the guy.
Yeah, I also love him punching, Spider-Man punching the hole through the roof of the car and just grabbing his face. Like, his strategy is just like, I'm just going to put my hand over his eyes so he can't see while he's driving.
But yeah, then the guy runs into this abandoned building, and Spider-Man starts stalking him like a slasher villain.
Yes. This is again Raimi's horror sensibility coming out here in a couple of ways. One, the set design here. This feels like a set that is just a bigger version of the cabin from Evil Dead. It's so dilapidated, it's so shitty, it's so gross, it's so creepy. He shoots it in the way that he shoots the basement from the Evil Dead house. And then also, all the shit with Spider-Man, where there's the great shot of, and I think this is just a stunt guy on some kind of wire or rope or something. I don't think this shot is Spider-Man CGI'd in, because it looks really good. But there's the moment where he's kind of like looking around, and he's like looking. I think the mugger is like looking towards the camera, and then behind him, Spider-Man like drops down from the ceiling on his web upside down with like his feet like on the web rope, and then just like ascends back up into the rafters like silently, and it's like really kind of creepy. Like, I don't know, spiders are creepy ass bugs, and as much as he's the good guy, he is kind of like a weird little creature. You know?
If I turned around and Tobey Maguire was hanging from the ceiling,
It'd be alarming.
I'd be creeped out.
Wearing that red balaclava?
Yeah.
Whoa, what the fuck? But yeah, so then eventually Spider-Man like full on attacks him. They have their little fight here. The guy's got a gun. He gets disarmed and then immediately pulls out a knife, which I love. That this guy is like, not only is he planning on taking down half of the NYPD, but apparently he was going to do it with one gun and one switchblade. And it's not a switchblade, actually. It's like a big buck knife, because what happens is Spider-Man like kicks it out of his hand or some shit, and it goes up and sticks in the rafter, and then he jumps and Spider-Man grabs the handle of the knife and uses it to hold himself up on the rafter while he kicks this dude in the chest, which rocks. It's great. And yeah, so eventually Spider-Man kind of has beat. I love, sorry, there's another Raimi thing that I need to call out here. I love Spider-Man grabbing this dude and smashing his head through two windows. Yeah. And both times you see the shot of like Tobey Maguire or the stuntman in the Spider-Man suit, like with this guy, like backing up to then put his head forward through the window. And then the camera switches to the other side of the door, because these are like windows on a door, and it switches to the other side, and you just see the guy's face come through with a bunch of broken glass. And then it does that twice. He does it for both times. And I'm like, I love this man's direction so much.
This man just sliced his jugular vein open. This man needs medical attention.
Yes, yeah. So then, yeah, he like backs him up to this window that's like overlooking like this pier or whatever. And the guy does the whole "give me a chance," and he's like, "What about my uncle? Did you give him a chance?" He backs him up, and then one of the helicopter searchlights illuminates the guy's face, and this is the moment where Peter realizes that he is fully responsible for his uncle's death, because this is the guy that stole the money who he let go. And I like that how Maguire plays this moment. And again, I think this is like one of the strongest movements of the movie. This all works great for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy trips and falls out the window.
Yes. Yeah.
And dies.
And which I also love. I also love that this guy dies.
Yeah.
Right? Like Spider-Man doesn't really kill him, but it's also like, no, yeah, that guy doesn't go to jail. He just falls from like a third-story window and breaks his neck, and that's it.
Yeah. And then Peter like takes his mask off, fucking idiot, and walks up to the window to look out.
Yeah.
And then a spotlight from the NYPD shines on him, and he escapes. And like, now Peter Parker's just wanted for murder.
Yeah, this dude's face should be on the cover of the Daily Bugle the next morning. There are a few things in this movie where I'm like, if you really wanted to figure out who Spider-Man was, like if you really wanted his identity, there is a paper trail. Because think about it. He showed up at that wrestling match. He probably had to fill out some kind of paperwork with his real name.
Some kind of release.
They probably took an ID, you know? So like that's there, right? And that guy was dressed up like he actually was billed as Spider-Man, right? During that wrestling match. And if you, again, I feel like if I was one of Peter Parker's classmates at the high school that he went to, I would have a full-on cork board with the red yarn and pictures connecting newspaper articles and shit, because if one of his classmates at that high school, I'd be like, okay, that weird guy Peter Parker, there was that day when he suddenly got really strong after we went to the spider exhibit on the field trip, right? He got really strong. He was fucking shooting webs out of his wrists, and they were sticking to lunch trays in the cafeteria. And then he punched a dude so hard in the chest that it broke all of his ribs and sternum. And then shortly after that, his uncle died, and then Spider-Man showed up, right? So I feel like if I knew Peter Parker in high school, I would be like, listen, I know who this guy is. Just trust me, everything connects. I think the trail is there.
Yeah. And we get a montage of him stopping crime.
Yes, this is where
and tons of New Yorkers talking about,
oh man,
the Spider-Man.
The man on the street interviews in this montage are maybe one of my favorite things in this entire movie. I love every single one of these people that they found. I love how they're written. They might be slightly improv, not sure. But I love there's like these two goth chicks at one point, and one of them's like, guy with 8 hands. Sounds hot. Yeah, and I also love the dude who's like, he stinks and I don't like him. Which I'm like, that guy has some connections to, the mafia was still, the mafia continues to be a force in the New York City metropolitan area. But I imagine in 2002, it was still prime mafia hours. I feel like that guy has some connections, and that's why he's anti-Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's gonna sleep with the fishes. Then we meet one of the best characters. Okay. The two best things about this movie.
Yeah.
One of them's named Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
The other one is named J.K. Simmons.
That is absolutely correct, my friend. Yeah.
J.K. Simmons was born to play this role?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
He looks exactly like the comic book character with the hair and the mustache and everything. And man, yeah, no, it's one of the best casting decisions that has ever been made. Because it's just J.K. Simmons chomping on that cigar and yelling at people. I love the whole thing, and this continues throughout all three of these Raimi movies. I love the whole thing where anytime anyone comes into his office, they're like, there's something very urgent that they need him to do, and he's like, get out of here!
Yeah, his wife's always on the phone. Ted Raimi's sniveling around in the background there.
I don't remember if it's in this movie or in 2, because I watched them back to back. But in one of the scenes with J. Jonah Jameson, his wife's on the phone, and there's a thing basically like she's calling because the tile that they were going to put in the foyer is out of stock.
It's in this one.
And he's like, tell her to put a rug down. It's so fucking funny.
There's a little bit more here. Harry and Peter have moved in together. MJ and Harry are now dating, and Peter finds out talking to MJ after work one day.
Where she's working at a diner, and I do want to call out just again another great New York extra in this movie,
the cook that's yelling at her,
Enrique. Yes, I love MJ is talking to Peter, and she's like pretending she doesn't work at this fucking diner that she works at, and then this guy Enrique, who looks like the human model that they based the alien diner owner from fucking Attack of the Clones on. He looks like the human version of that guy. He comes out and he's like, "Excuse me, Miss Watson, I'm talking to you." This guy, just primo, yelling at someone in a thick New York accent. There's a lot of that in this movie. He's one of the best. I wanted to call out the guy who plays Enrique specifically. I don't have the actor's name, but shout out that guy.
Yeah,
because he's fucking hilarious.
He's good. I have a note in here to talk about Franco around here. So there's not really like a good scene or anything, but there's more Franco in this half of the movie.
There is like a little bit of Franco right after here.
Yeah.
Because Peter goes back to the apartment that him and Harry are sharing.
Yeah.
And Willem Dafoe's there kind of talking on the phone, ignoring his son.
Yeah.
I do love how much Norman Osborn hates his own son in this movie. I know I kind of already mentioned it, but it's really fucking funny to me. But here, it's like Peter and Harry have like a little moment about like Peter just found out that he's dating MJ. He didn't tell him, so they're kind of like making eyes at each other, being like, "Hey, what's up with that dude?"
And Norman's like, "Peter, tell me about this mystery girl that Harry is seeing."
Yeah.
What do you think of Franco?
In general, I am mixed on Franco. I've seen him do performances that work for me. I've seen him in movies and thought that he sucked and was very bad. Him in this, I think he's fine. Mm-hmm. I think Franco is fine. The thing that I kind of think is interesting is these movies don't ever make you really like Harry Osborn. And I think part of that is maybe Franco's performance, because he is sort of like a sneering little shit a lot of the time. But also some of it's the writing, because like anytime we see Harry and MJ in their relationship, he's like telling her she's wearing the wrong color dress and like getting mad at her for like things that she's saying, and even when she comes out of the diner, she's like, "Don't tell Harry I'm working at a diner, he'd think it was low." And I'm like, this guy fucking sucks. Like Harry Osborn in general, in all three of these movies, it's kind of like he's presented as kind of a shitty guy. Like he's kind of an asshole. And so I'm like, I never like this character, but also they never give me anything to like. But also, Franco doesn't do anything in his performance that endears me to him at all, right? I think it's fine because I think that's an okay way for this character to be handled. But I really feel no pathos for Harry Osborn at all. And like in the third one, which spoilers for Spider-Man 3 if you haven't seen it, in the third one, he dies at the end and it's kind of supposed to be this big emotional moment.
Sure.
Even as a kid, I was like, I don't give a fuck about Harry.
Yeah.
Like that guy sucked. So yeah, I think he's fine. I think he's doing an okay job. There's no moments of his performance where I was like noticing like, oh, that was really stilted or that was really like wooden or that was really overplayed or whatever. But he's also not really doing anything special for me. He's just kind of there, you know. What do you think?
So I'm kind of mixed on Franco as an actor. I should note that there have been numerous credible sexual assault allegations against Franco as a person.
Yes, by many accounts, not only the sexual assault allegations, although those are definitely the most serious things.
Yeah.
Just by all accounts, kind of a shitty dude. Like from what I have heard, just kind of a bad person.
Yeah.
James Franco.
I also find it very funny that he's a director and has chosen to direct like Cormac McCarthy adaptations and William Faulkner adaptations, and none of them are good.
Yeah.
But as an actor, I think he's generally okay.
Yeah.
I think he sucks shit in this. I think he is terrible.
Yeah.
It's like Hayden Christensen in Attack of the Clones, but worse.
Okay.
Somehow.
All right.
Somehow worse.
Okay.
And he sucks the life out of this movie.
Okay.
At points. And I don't like you said, I don't get why he and Peter are friends.
Right.
Because he just seems like an asshole.
Right.
So when conflict arises between, and I don't have a frame of reference for Harry Osborn in really any other Spider-Man media, so I don't know how this compares to comics or other stuff. In the comics,
he's definitely presented as a lot more like down to earth and relatable than he is presented in the movies. And again, I think that's maybe partially due to Franco's performance.
Yeah.
Right.
So when the conflict arises between them that starts in this movie and then develops in the other ones, I really don't mourn the loss of their friendship.
Yeah.
Because I think he's just, it was never really there to begin with.
Right. It's sort of like, well, Peter's better off without this guy anyway, because he's like this fucking rich dickhead. He was stealing the girl that he was in love with and also just being a nuisance all the time.
But like when you zero in on some of his line deliveries, I'm like, I can't believe that's how you thought you should say that. Of all of the ways to say that line, that's the one that you picked.
That's interesting. That wasn't sticking out for me in this movie, but like that's totally fine because I didn't enjoy this performance by any stretch.
Yeah,
so.
I think Franco sucks ass.
Okay, fair enough.
He's fucking garbage in this.
Fair enough. Yeah, he didn't stick out to me as like particularly egregious, but I also like I said, he wasn't doing anything that really endeared me to him either. We get a lot of Peter fighting crime, him setting up cameras and shit, and taking pictures of Spider-Man and like selling them to the Bugle. And then kind of the next like big thing is the World Unity Festival, right?
Yeah, what the fuck is a World Unity Festival, and why is Oscorp the ones hosting it?
I don't know if this is real or if this is just something they made up for the movie, right? But I misremembered this as being the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade because later there is the Thanksgiving scene in this movie, and I thought they were closer together and that this was the same day or something, right? It's not. This is clearly separated by like several months of time in the movie, and the Thanksgiving scene is like way later. So this is not the Thanksgiving Day Parade, it's just the World Unity Festival, which I guess is a time when a bunch of people from all over the world party in Times Square and there's giant balloons and a defense contractor is sponsoring the whole thing.
And
it would be like if Lockheed Martin threw a block party in Times Square. Yeah, it's fucking nuts. It's crazy.
And Mary Jane shows up in her appropriation dress.
Yeah, it's slightly problematic. I think seeing it again, because I remembered this.
I had this action figure.
It's been talked about a little. Oh, you do?
I had a Spider-Man, and I had a Mary Jane that's from this scene with like a collapsible, the collapsible balcony that she's on.
Yeah. I will say I remembered it being more egregious than it actually is in the movie, but it is, it's still like a thing where you're like, okay, it was 2002. We were maybe just putting a white lady in this dress, right? And not really thinking about it. Because, yeah, it's like this Asian-inspired dress that she's wearing, and she's got, like, the chopsticks in her hair or whatever. And this is when Harry is being the worst boyfriend of all time and being like, I told you to wear the black dress because you're meeting my father for the first time, and my father loves black. Which is also just a funny line. I love that Norman Osborn is, like, gonna be more impressed by MJ if she's dressed in black. Because he's goth.
Macy Gray's also singing.
Oh,
here.
yes, she is. Because it was 2002, my friend.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a pop star in this movie for 2 seconds.
Yes.
The goblin shows up. The
Yeah.
CGI in this scene is particularly rough for several reasons.
It's hard because it's like bright daylight.
It's bright daylight. There's the big balloons everywhere.
Yeah.
That look very badly CG. And then there's parts where the scale of Green Goblin on the glider, he's like down at street level near people, and he looks smaller than the people he's next to. Like the scale seems off for some reason.
Yeah. I will say, by and large, I think the effects in this movie have mostly held up okay. This scene is an exception.
Yeah, this might be probably the worst CG in this movie. There's some great practical stuff here too.
There's even some decent CG in this movie as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, not so much in this scene. There's also a moment that I wanted to call out while we're talking about the CG kind of being here and there in this movie. In an earlier scene where like Peter is testing out his powers, there is the shots of him jumping across the rooftops, and a few of those are just so clearly a cartoon dude just flying between buildings, to the point where I was like, this looks like it is PlayStation graphics. But those moments thankfully are few and far between in this movie, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
For the most part. But yeah, so the Green Goblin attacks, and David, the Green Goblin, so he shoots like some missiles into the building, and it like starts blowing up the balcony, and like Mary Jane starts falling off, and then he throws a pumpkin-shaped grenade that turns, because we had an earlier scene where the board members voted Norman Osborn off the board.
Yeah.
He throws a grenade that turns those guys into skeletons. And then they collapse into piles of dust. Which, it's so fucking good. It's shitty little cartoon skeletons. They don't look great. But the fact that this happens in this movie delights me to no end, because it feels, number one, very Raimi, and number two, like a thing that you wouldn't be able to get away with in a family superhero movie now. It feels like you can't blow up a bunch of guys whose only crime was like corporate politicking. It feels like you can't throw a grenade at them that turns them into skeletons and then they fall into piles of dust in a superhero movie anymore. This feels like a very special moment in the history of the superhero genre for me.
The skeletons?
Yes. And also, okay, the guy, he throws the grenade, the guys turn into skeletons, then they scream. So they are screaming skeletons, and then they fall into piles of dust. It rocks. It's so funny.
I want to call out, there's a lot of good extras in this scene.
Oh, yeah.
I want to call out the lady who points up and goes, "It's Spider-Man!"
See that? Okay, you were talking about Franco's line deliveries. That is the line delivery in this movie that sticks out to me as the worst. Is that lady?
I think it's awesome.
That lady it literally just cuts to her for one shot, and she just goes, "It's Spider-Man."
And I like this fucking stupid ass kid.
This kid has a death wish. This kid does not want to be alive anymore.
This shit's falling on him. I don't remember what it is. If it's like the balloon,
it's
or
like the
some...
big arch thing that they had across the stage. Yeah, that Macy Gray was performing on. It starts falling down towards him, and he's just staring at it like, yes, My time has come. Please take me. I'm ready to go to the great beyond. And his mother is like standing off to the side being like, Timmy, move. And he's just like, take me, Jesus. Take me into your arms. And Spider-Man like swings and grabs this fucking kid and he hands him off to his mom. And they ADR like a voice that sounds like 3 years too young to be this child going, Mommy. And I'm like, that's not that kid's voice because that kid did not want to be saved. He was ready to go.
I want to talk about the Goblin costume just for a second.
Yeah, let's do it.
I love it.
Yes.
It's
okay.
It looks silly.
Yes.
But I love it. The only thing I don't like about it, and in a weird way, I do kind of like it, is that the open mouth has a screen on it, and you can see Dafoe's lips. You can see through the screen. And you can see his mouth under it.
See, I love that.
But there's moments where it like doesn't quite line up, and but it's fun. It's kind of charming. I also like how the eye lenses flip up sometimes.
They retract, yeah.
And it's really just so Dafoe can act with his eyes.
Yep. Yeah.
Which are great. It's great because he has a mask on. It's a great way for that performance to come through and feel more human and tangible.
Yes. Whereas Tobey Maguire in the Spider-Man mask, they do towards the end of the movie kind of rip up that mask a little bit so that he can do the same thing. But most of the time, especially on the rooftop scene, which we'll talk about later, it's funny because the Goblin is able to act with his eyes and mouth because you can sort of see them. Tobey Maguire just kind of has to move his head when he talks.
Yeah.
Like it's Power Rangers, which to borrow an observation from Weird Al Yankovic, yes, the Goblin's costume does remind me of a Power Ranger villain. And I love it as well. I think it's very funny that Oscorp Industries, who's a defense, like a weapons manufacturer for the U.S. military, was like, okay, like we built this glider thing and it maybe sort of looks like bat wings, but you know, maybe aerodynamics and shit, like that's explainable. But the suit that the guy uses to ride it, we're gonna make it have huge pecs, like it is a suit of Greek breastplate, and then also the helmet is going to look like a weird Power Ranger monster. Like what was the point of this from an R&D perspective? And when we see the guy testing the glider earlier, he's wearing kind of like these goggle things. It's not the Goblin helmet.
Yeah.
So I'm like, was this a rejected prototype design? Was this something that Norman Osborn had made specifically for him? Like, what is the deal exactly with the Goblin suit? Really what I want to know is, did this exist before he turned himself into a Green Goblin?
Before he decided, I'm going to go with this whole Goblin thing.
Right.
And make pumpkin bombs.
Right. Or did he like have a team at Oscorp post his Goblinification working on this? Was he like, I have a special project for you. I would like this suit. Yes, it does have to have the ears. I want the eyes aren't the right shade of yellow. Like, it's just, yeah. But it's great. I love the design too. Yeah. It's very fun.
Spider-Man saves MJ from falling off of this balcony. And they swing away. And I cannot unsee this. There's a close-up of MJ holding on to Spider-Man. And it's so clear that that Kirsten Dunst is holding on to a dummy, and that her hair is blowing the wrong way. I can never not unsee that because the dummy just looks so stiff.
Yeah,
but I wanted to call that out. But we get tons more Goblin stuff here. We get the best scene in the movie.
It's probably the best scene in the movie.
It's the Jekyll and Hyde scene.
Yeah.
It's Willem Dafoe going back and forth between Norman Osborn and Green Goblin.
Yes.
in his African mask room.
Yes.
Which I guess all rich guys have.
Yes. Yeah. Also, I love how every time we do an establishing shot of the Osborn mansion, it looks like this man owns an entire 14-story Gothic building in the middle of New York City. Like, we do the establishing shot and I'm like, that looks like a government building, but apparently one man lives here by himself because his son is living in an apartment in Manhattan. Like, it's crazy. But yes, he's in his African mask room in front of a mirror, doing the Gollum and Smeagol thing. Right.
And it's incredible stuff.
He is so We haven't really talked about Dafoe's performance other than he's great.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much else to say other
Right.
than he's like fucking fantastic.
I mean, as always.
And he's the best part of this movie.
Yeah,
as he often is in the movies that he's in.
Yes, this is the first Dafoe movie that we've covered on the podcast.
Yeah.
This is our first Dafoe appearance.
Yeah, but we're big fans.
Yes.
Here.
We're Willem fans.
We almost, if I had won, I did win the coin toss for February. My other option was maybe we would do Willem to February and just talk about a bunch of Dafoe movies, but we didn't.
Yeah.
He's great. He's really memorable in this, and I'll say, I know you're not terribly into Marvel these days. That Spider-Man: No Way Home, he comes back
where
in
he
that.
reprises this performance.
He's almost like it. It's kind of worth watching just for his performance.
Honestly, after I watch maybe Spider-Man 3 again, I might just like go to that one because I know I don't have like all the context on the other Marvel movies, but I've seen both Garfield Amazing Spider-Mans. I've seen all of these movies, right? And I'm like, if I just pop in for that one, I'll probably understand enough that it's not going to be like too jarring. I don't know. I might check it out.
Yeah, I think Holland might
because Melina's back for that one too.
Melina's back. Yeah, Jamie Foxx is back for that.
Yeah, he was. Man, that was a good performance in a very bad movie.
Yeah, I feel bad for him. He was really trying something there.
Yeah.
And honestly, Tom Holland might be my favorite of the live-action Spider-Men.
Yeah, I've never seen him. I've only seen Garfield and Maguire.
Yeah, I think Homecoming is really good. It's been a while since I've seen it. I only saw Far From Home once, but that one has Jake Gyllenhaal in it. I love Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
And then No Way Home was fun. It was fine in kind of like a bashing action figures together sort of way, but I didn't think it was the cinematic revelation that so many people did. But Dafoe's really good in it.
Yes, and Dafoe is really good here, sneering at himself in a mirror.
Yeah.
I also love all the camera shit that Raimi's doing here. There's a great moment where the camera is behind, or it's like over his shoulder, and you're seeing Willem Dafoe as the Goblin in the mirror, and then Dafoe turns around, and his facial expression totally changes when he turns around, and then he's just Norman again. And he delivers the like, the board members, you killed them. And then he turns back toward the mirror again and goes, we killed them. And it's like, because Raimi has put the camera where he's put it, and because he's just holding, you get to see that this is not the camera tricking you. Willem Dafoe is just switching the characters this fast.
Yeah, well,
seamlessly.
And there are shots where it's just focused on the mirror.
Yeah.
And there's no camera movement or anything.
Yeah.
He just switches.
Yep.
One line after another.
Yeah.
And it's great stuff.
Yeah.
Dafoe's one of my favorite actors of all time. He's one of the best actors ever, I think.
He's incredible. And he's also really understands the tone of this movie.
Yes.
Because we talked about how this movie's a little bit of a camp fest. It's very silly. The tone is simultaneously very silly, but also very sincere.
Well, and every one of Dafoe's lines as the Green Goblin is the most stereotypical villain horseshit you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And Dafoe sells the shit out of it.
Yes. And I think he really nailed the tone of this thing. He understood what Sam was going for. He is matching it. And I think sort of the way that Elfman and Raimi are gelling on this thing, I think Dafoe is also gelling in the same way, where the three of them, as much as some other performances in this movie are good, I think really the backbone of this thing is like a triumvirate between Raimi, Elfman, and Dafoe, because they are operating on exactly the same wavelength with this thing.
The next moment here is the Goblin shows up at the Daily Bugle to fucking kill J. Jonah Jameson.
J. Jonah Jameson. So he's in his office yelling.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, Peter's there, and he's, trying to underpay him for pictures and yelling about how Spider-Man's a menace or whatever. And it's all fantastic. And then he throws because he's always chomping a cigar. He throws his cigar out the window. And I love that the Green Goblin just decided to do a little goof here.
Yeah.
Just do a silly little bit. Because the cigar comes flying back through the window and lands on his desk. And J.K. Simmons is like, what the fuck? And then the wall fucking explodes. And then, the Goblin has him by the neck, and he's like, who's the photographer who takes the pictures of Spider-Man? And I love, even as a kid, it really struck me that this is a moment where you really get to know what type of person J. Jonah Jameson actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love that J. Jonah Jameson refuses to give up Peter Parker here, right?
Yeah.
He could very easily be like, oh yeah, it's that kid, right? Or it's that Parker guy, right? And like, he doesn't even give him a fake name. He's just like, I don't know, right? And I'm like, I love that. I love that as much as he is like this stingy, low-balling, fucking red-faced, screaming boss. At the end of the day, he cares about his people, and he's not going to give them up to this fucking psycho who just blew up half of his building. Which I think speaks highly of him. I think he's deep down, there's a good guy in there.
Yeah. As Spider-Man shows up, they exchange some quips, and then
He gets
Green
gassed.
Goblin has these gas. These gas shooters or whatever in his wrists,
yeah.
and he goes sleep, which is funny as fuck.
Yes.
So he kidnaps Spider-Man and takes him to the roof to a rooftop somewhere to just torment him. And this is where we get a lot of the eye acting from Dafoe, where the eye lenses flip up.
Yes.
And he's talking about how like the only thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail.
Yes.
We're not so different, you and I.
Spider-Man, what if you and I joined forces, and then what if sometimes we snuggled a little bit? Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, can I give you a little kiss on the forehead?
Spider-Man, what if you and I went out to dinner sort of as friends, but then if it was fun, maybe what if we kept doing that and then we did it as a little bit more than friends?
Sorry, it does seem a little bit like the Green Goblin wants to date Spider-Man in this scene, is what I'm getting at. That's always been a little bit of my thing in this scene specifically, where I'm like, he didn't just kill him, and he's really selling him on this partnership thing, and I'm like, I think the Green Goblin kind of wants to fuck Spider-Man.
The gay undertones of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man by Justus Burkett.
They are both caked up, by the way.
Oh, so kicked up.
Both of them. That's an observation the internet has had many times. But I like this rooftop scene. I like that it is a rooftop on a soundstage very clearly.
Yeah.
And it is Tobey Maguire in a practical Spider-Man suit. He's just in the full body spandex. And then Willem Dafoe in this ridiculous plastic armor with this silly Power Ranger helmet. And they're just talking. And I think it kind of rocks. I think it's like kind of a great scene in this movie to just have them both be in full costume and him just being like, join me, Spider-Man. And him being like, no, I'll never. He's like still half drugged. So he's like barely talking too. It's wild that this scene is given this much room to breathe in this movie. And I think without Dafoe, it totally doesn't work. But because he's there, I love it.
Yeah, I think, again, I think the second half of the movie doesn't work as well for me because it feels like we're jumping between things really quickly. And it's like, okay, we're going from thing to thing to thing to thing. And oh, here we are at the end. But we get more Dafoe here.
Yeah. Which is great.
Which makes it really enjoyable.
It is the consolation prize for sure of maybe the second half feeling maybe a little rushed or confused. The consolation prize is more Dafoe.
Yeah.
So Spider-Man says no, the Goblin flies away, and then it's the next major thing is the building fire, right?
We have the kiss and then the building fire.
Oh, the kiss. Yeah. So with the kiss, where's Mary Jane coming from?
I don't know.
She coming from work or some shit
or something.
Peter, it's an audition.
Yeah, Peter and MJ are talking.
Yeah.
And Peter leaves, and these guys chase MJ down an alley.
And the most obvious rapists in New York City, right? These guys see a woman walk by, and immediately, as if they are cartoon wolves, their eyes just get super wide, and they're like, humana, humana, humana.
They're very coordinated too, because as she keeps running, more of them pop out of the alleyways to get her.
It's also crazy that she doesn't immediately notice that this happens, because Peter sees it happening and is like, oh shit.
Yeah.
These cartoonish henchmen are going after MJ. But because she walks past them and they immediately start tailing her, and I'm like, she would definitely notice immediately and would be like, well, I'm not going to go down that dark alley. But yeah, they're highly coordinated, as you mentioned.
And it's raining. Someone turned up a rain machine to 10, and you can just very clearly see Kirsten Dunst's breasts through this shirt that she's on.
That is true.
She's wearing this very thin shirt.
That is true.
Put some hair on my chest as a kid, I'm sure. Made me the man I am today.
Probably a formative moment for me as well.
And Spider-Man saves her.
I did want to call out, because I was mentioning the Bonesaw fight as some good fight choreo in this movie. I also think the stunts in this sequence, another highlight for me. There's a really great shot where MJ is kind of watching him beat up some of these guys, and the camera is just staying on her, and you're hearing like noises of like fists connecting off screen, off camera, and then a dude flies past her and goes through a window, and then a dude flies past her from the other side and goes through another window, and it's one shot. So very clearly Kirsten Dunst was just standing there, and two guys actually flew right by her and into windows. And she kind of has to like move out of the way a little bit to like miss them hitting her. And I'm like, they just did that for real, which fucks. And it's very clearly Kirsten Dunst and not a body double, because the camera's pretty close on her and she's facing directly forward. So you can see, you would be able to tell if it wasn't her. So stuff like that, I'm just like, good stunt. And some of the fight choreo in this scene is really fun and good too.
And so afterwards, Spider-Man is hanging upside down.
Yep.
And at no point is MJ like, hey, you kind of sound like my friend Peter that I was just talking to
He
2
also-
seconds ago.
He also, after he rescues her at the World Unity Festival, he talks to her so much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, immediately, if this was not a camp silly movie that like just asks the audience to suspend their disbelief on things like this, in real life, immediately she would be like, Peter?
Well, and he's really prone, when he sees her like in danger, he's really prone to shouting, MJ!
And it's like, how do you know my fucking name? How does Spider-Man know my name?
But we get the scene where it's raining and she pulls down the bottom of his mask and kisses him.
Yes, notoriously
upside down.
Very uncomfortable for Tobey Maguire to film this scene.
Oh, okay.
He was basically being waterboarded in this scene.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because they did have a rain machine on. It was like a practical rain. They didn't add CGI rain, right? So water was falling on him as he was hanging upside down, and she pulls the mask over his mouth, but not his nose. So basically, while they were making out, he couldn't breathe through his mouth really because he was making out with Kirsten Dunst. But he also couldn't breathe through his nose because the fabric of the mask was on his nose and it was wet and getting wetter, right? So he was basically being waterboarded. He like couldn't breathe at all. And has spoken many times about how this scene was very uncomfortable to film and he like thought he was going to pass out.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Apparently Kirsten Dunst didn't have fun filming this scene either, just because like she was wet and cold. And it was uncomfortable and weird. Her and Tobey Maguire, by the way, were dating in real life when they filmed this movie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, and apparently there was some tension on the set of this film because James Franco actually did start developing some feelings for Kirsten Dunst during the filming of this movie. And apparently Tobey Maguire and James Franco had a little bit of real life tension on the set of this because Tobey was like, hey, like I'm dating her. And James Franco was like, hey, Kirsten Dunst, you know, which is an interesting little behind the scenes detail here.
But I was watching it last night and as like an emotional moment in this movie, it really still works for me.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's romantic.
It's kind of hot.
It
you
is.
know?
Yes, and that is really the key here.
Yeah,
right. It's hot.
It's like legitimately steamy and sexy.
This movie's a little horny
in this PG-13 movie,
which I don't think they let superhero movies be anymore.
Yeah,
this movie is kind of horny, right? Peter Parker does not only want to hold hands with Mary Jane. He doesn't only want to take her out on little coffee dates. This man wants to fuck.
He wants to test out that new cock he got from the spider bite.
And I think notably when we see... Yeah.
Took you a second there.
Sorry.
It's fine.
It had to sink in for a second. Yes, he wants his superpower. He wants to see what that superpowered spider hog do. Does that shoot webs as well? We'll figure it out. Yeah, so... later on in this movie, when MJ is talking about how she's in love with Spider-Man to him, she also wants to fuck Spider-Man. And it's very clear that Kirsten Dunst is playing that a little bit. She's like, I'm enamored with this dude. He's so mysterious. He's so alluring. And like, I kind of want to see what's in those spandex tights, you know? And I'm like, it's palpable in this movie in a way that I don't think they let family films be anymore, where it's like, yeah, no, like these are adults and they want to bone each other, you know? And this scene is probably the best example of it.
Yeah.
The Podmaster just texted me and she said, I need you to stop calling Spider-Man horny. No boning here. Apologies to the Podmaster. So we'll get off that topic, I guess.
Yeah. This next scene is an apartment on fire where Spider-Man saves a really ugly looking baby. I have to say, you could land a plane on this baby's forehead. This kid looks like he has some problems.
I will say they basically repeat this scene in the second movie.
Yeah, I remember the 1 and 2 is really good.
Yes, a very cute baby that he saves in the second movie. So maybe they realized that and corrected it.
Yeah,
and they were like, we got to redo this with a cuter baby.
He hears some screaming and he goes back up to the burning building
Yes.
to save the old lady, and it's the Green Goblin in a veil, just making old lady noises and doing a bit,
which is so fucking funny.
Yeah, it whips ass.
It's so funny that it's just Willem Dafoe in full Green Goblin regalia being like, "Woo, woo, woo." When he turns around and screams, by the way, crazy high-pitched scream. Don't know if it was actually Willem Dafoe who made this noise. Probably not. But that was a moment when I was a kid that for sure I was running and hiding in my parents' bathroom as well. And then they have this fight in this burning building. This is maybe my favorite fight in the movie, is the one in this burning building. I really love all this shit. Just I love the environment. It's practical fire. They're just on. This is probably 2 stuntmen and not Willem Dafoe and Tobey Maguire, but it's just guys in these suits surrounded by real flames, throwing punches and kicks at each other. And it's some great shit. And then the Green Goblin has one of his bombs that has these fucking drones with blades.
And there's that shot of Spider-Man jumping up and kind of flipping and posing to dodge them in slow motion. That's one of the most memorable shots for me in this entire franchise.
And the little drone things with the blades in that shot are CGI.
Yeah.
But he's not.
Yeah, he's not.
So that's actually just a stunt guy doing that in front of a bunch of fire that's actually there. And the only thing they added was the little blade things that he's dodging, which, like, that was really striking me on this watch. I was like, no, that's just a guy doing that crazy acrobatic shit while surrounded by a shit ton of flames in a Spider-Man costume. And that rules. It's so cool. But yeah, so eventually in this scene, this is basically the Green Goblin giving him his last chance to join or die, right?
What about my generous proposal?
Yeah.
Are you in or are you out? It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind. Little bitch ass Tobey Maguire. Sorry.
I sort of like that. I like Spider-Man's quips in this movie because they are cringy and bad.
Yeah.
And I think it fits the tone of the movie.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a camp silly. We're having a goofy time. Yeah, and so then Tobey Maguire at one point gets cut by one of the little drone things.
Yes.
And then he escapes. Spider-Man manages to escape the building while the Goblin is somehow incapacitated or whatever. And then the way this scene ends is the Goblin, there's an extreme close-up of the Goblin helmet, and you can kind of see Willem Dafoe's eyes and mouth through it, like we've been talking about. And he goes, "No one says no to me!" And then a bunch of CGI fire pops up from the bottom of the frame and engulfs the screen. Transition to next scene, which is so fucking funny. I love it so much.
This is the Thanksgiving scene.
Yeah.
Which has gained popularity in the last few years.
Yes.
People claim that this is a Thanksgiving movie, which, sure, if you want to do that, that's fine.
There's one Thanksgiving scene in it, so sure. We see a turkey. There's a whole thing about cranberry sauce. He had to beat an old lady with a stick to get those cranberries. Yeah, Peter shows up late because he's been Spider-Manic. This is immediately following the last scene, right? So so then
he's literally getting back from the fight, it seems like, or back from being Spider-Man at least.
Yeah, he might have gone and done a couple more things as Spider-Man or whatever. But...
Yeah, because he swings into his loft bedroom, and then they go up to look for him, and he's still in costume, and he hides on the ceiling. and that's when the cut on his arm leaks a little bit of blood and it drops on the ground.
Yeah.
And you can get the sense that like Willem Dafoe can smell him,
or hear or something,
and he notices the blood drop.
Yes, he notices the blood drop, and does a great just Willem Dafoe goblin face, and then he looks up at the ceiling. He's not there anymore. He goes out on the balcony, and like now Spider-Man's hiding under the balcony or whatever. Yeah, and then Peter comes in through the front door with the cranberries, and then Willem Dafoe ruins Thanksgiving. I love him going to reach for the fucking candied yams and Aunt May slapping his hand like he's a child.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I love him like threateningly sharpening the knife as he looks at this old woman.
Like, you slap my hand one more time, this knife's going into you. Aunt May. I'll carve you up like a turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he notices the cut on Peter's arm, puts two and two together, and then
Yes.
decides he has to leave.
Yeah.
And
great just moment of acting from Willem Dafoe
Yeah.
when he notices it, because he's been in goblin mode, and it's almost like seeing the cut on Peter's arm jars him back to Norman mode for a second, because his voice changes back to kind of Norman voice, and he sounds really afraid when he's like, how did you say that happened? And I think part of it is like the goblin persona and the Norman persona are kind of at odds within him. And Norman doesn't want to hurt Peter. He loves Peter. He wishes Peter was his son instead of his actual son, right? And so I think for a second, it's Norman going, oh shit, like the goblin's going to take back over and I'm going to have to kill him, right? It's just a nice little moment of performance from Dafoe in a movie full of a great Dafoe performance.
Franco follows Dafoe out into the hallway.
Holy
and
shit.
Willem Dafoe basically calls Mary Jane a whore.
A gold digging whore. Yeah. He doesn't use those words, but the thing that he says that really struck me this time is he says to Harry, your mother was beautiful too. They're all beautiful until they're sniffing after your trust fund like a pack of ravening wolves. And I was like, holy shit, this man is the absolute worst. And I know it's like the goblin persona or whatever, but like, holy shit.
And then when Franco goes back into the apartment and everyone has heard him, and MJ's like, thanks for defending me and from that creep.
Which valid. Extremely
totally
valid reaction. And then
And then Harry's like, that creep is my father.
And it's like that. I'm sorry. At this point, you need to disown your father.
Yeah.
Because that was indefensible. And he's never loved you anyway. You know that. You've had a bunch of lines in this movie about how he likes Peter better anyway. So it's like, I don't know, fucking maybe Aunt May's your mother figure now, Harry Osborn. Like, figure it out. But instead he's like, no, he's my dad, and that matters more than my girlfriend, I guess.
There's another great short scene here. We don't need to talk about Dafoe more because we've talked about him a ton, where the mask is like talking to him.
Yeah.
And this is just Willem Dafoe acting against a mask.
Yes.
Which is incredible.
It's incredible.
Where it's like, we attack his heart.
The only thing that I really want to specifically call out in this scene is that the goblin mask does sort of sound like he's like an alpha male hustle grind set Instagram account here, because he's spouting some like dollar store Sun Tzu bullshit. He says, the cunning warrior attacks neither body nor mind. And I was like, I feel like I've seen that superimposed over an image of like a guy with a digitally enhanced bicep, like curling an 80-pound dumbbell, you know?
Yeah.
On some Instagram hustle account.
and then he fucking blows up Aunt May. Which, rest in peace to that.
I know I've said a lot of things are like maybe my favorite scene in this movie. I do know what my favorite moment of this movie is. And this is so brief it's barely even a scene. But one of probably my favorite moment in this entire movie is Aunt May is saying the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
The wall fucking explodes. Practically. It
in
happens
one
for real.
shot, in the same shot.
Yes. And she turns around and the goblin is there. He looks so scary in this shot
Yeah.
because he's partially engulfed in darkness and his eyes are like glowing because they're reflecting the flames. And then she's screaming and he goes, finish it! finish it, and makes her finish the Lord's Prayer.
Which somehow he heard her outside of the house.
It's his super hearing, I guess.
I guess.
I think the serum gave him super hearing or something, because he also heard that blood drop.
And she goes, "Deliver us from evil."
It's so fucking good. I love this moment for the villain in this movie. Just there is something about making this terrified old lady finish saying the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, that is fucked up on like a Raimi level as opposed to a regular superhero family film level. It feels so, again, it feels so mean, you know? And oh man, I love Dafoe screaming "finish it" at this old woman. It's so good.
So Aunt May goes to the hospital.
Yeah.
And we get some more stuff with Peter and MJ here, where MJ basically just wants to fuck the shit out of Spider-Man.
She's like, hey, I've realized that I'm horny for Spider-Man. Has he ever mentioned me?
Yeah. And then Peter delivers an excellent line of game that's almost like, it's almost too good.
It's almost overkill, yeah.
Yeah. And I have part of it written down here where he's like, the thing about MJ is when she looks in your eyes, she makes you feel stronger and weaker at the same time, and excited and terrified at the same time, because you've reached the unreachable and you're not ready for it. And it's Jesus Christ, dude.
I love that he ends this by saying like, but like what you really know the most or something like that is, you know what kind of man you want to be.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, ooh, good. Like really good game, Peter Parker. Good line of game.
Yeah.
And
a little creepy, a little bit overkill.
It's a little bit overkill. He's a hopeless romantic.
Yeah.
But I think in this scene, I think Kirsten Dunst has made the decision. This is a theory I have about her performance in this movie and in Spider-Man 2. Because the moment where she actually finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man textually happens in the second movie, right? I think she decided as an actress that she knows before that. And I kind of think in this scene, she is playing, I already know that you're Spider-Man, but I'm not going to like ask you to confirm it, right? I sort of, or at least she suspects in this scene. I think she kind of already has it figured out because of some of the stuff she's doing with her face reacting to what he's saying.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's a moment where I think it's when she delivers the line, "Has he ever mentioned me?" about Spider-Man. It's almost like she's playing it like she's challenging him, right?
Yeah,
Like being like, "Oh, like make up a story then, because I already know that you're Spider-Man. So like, yeah, tell me what you think about me, but like pretend that you were saying it to somebody else, right?" It almost seems like she's playing his game here, because he knows, right? And there's something in her performance where I'm like, I feel like that's the decision she made. And it really works for me. I like it a lot.
And Aunt May is clearly like listening in, and she's pretending to be asleep, which is a nice little moment.
Yeah, it's cute.
And Harry walks in on them holding hands, and Peter's just like, "Hey."
Yeah, and they immediately like snatch their hands away from each other. And I also love that after that kind of like little awkward like, "Hey, Harry," there's like a cut back to Harry. He kind of looks like a little like devastated, and then it just cuts away.
Yeah, and then Harry tells Norman that MJ's in love with Peter, and then we get the Goblin jump scare transition.
Yes, yeah.
That cuts back to the hospital for more stuff with like Peter and May.
Yeah.
But I forgot that was in this movie.
Yeah.
It's really fucking wild that it's here.
Yeah. Yeah, where he's just like,
"Ah!" Yeah, he literally just looks at the screen and goes, "Ah!" And it's like a half second.
There's also another jump scare earlier when Norman wakes up on the floor after he's been goblin-fied.
Yeah.
And they find him on the floor and they're like, "Oh, Norman, are you all right? What happened?" And he's like, "Last night I was." And then huge music sting, jump cut back to him like transforming into the goblin. And it's like such a intense jump scare for a movie for children.
Yeah.
I imagine in 2002, theaters burst into tears when that happened. But yeah, I did want to mention that Norman very clearly still as the Goblin persona. He's very clearly playing Goblin. Also, when Harry walks in, he just hears Goblin cackling, and he's like,
Oh yeah.
Dad? Dad, is that you? And it's like,
I keep hearing this cackling around the house.
It's like, Dad, are you watching Animal House? What's so funny, Dad? But I do love that Willem Dafoe is still very clearly playing the Goblin persona, and he takes a moment here to be very fatherly to Harry, right? In full Goblin mode, he's like, I haven't been, treating you the way that you deserve. I need to be more tender with you. Come here, bring it in, son. And they give a very tender hug here. And I'm like, that is so fucking funny that it's the Goblin doing that and not Norman, who at every turn we have basically seen just detests his own child.
Back at the hospital, May and Peter talk, and Aunt May is like, you should go tell Mary Jane how you feel, because you've been in love with her forever, or whatever. And he goes to a payphone to call her, and has to leave a message. And then here's the Goblin cackling on the other end of the phone.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
And we're at the end now, I guess.
Yeah, yep. Because basically in the scene with fucking Norman and Harry, that's when Norman figures out that Peter is Spider-Man. So
yeah. This is all on the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
I love Willem Dafoe flying around on the glider, singing "Itsy Bitsy Spider."
Yes.
I love the rockets on the glider.
Yes.
I love the way that it's always like we see a practical rocket being fired off of the glider.
Yes. Yeah.
And he blows up a building.
So he fires the rocket to blow up the thing to get the cable car detached or whatever. And then after that, Spider-Man he has caught both the cable car and MJ, and he's dangling from the bridge, and they're bringing the barge under him. And the Goblin is flying past him a bunch and just kind of punching him. And then eventually he brings out the blades on the glider to try and stab him. But not once is he shooting a missile or a bullet or throwing a grenade at him, which we've seen him do a bunch in this movie. And I'm like, did the Goblin just run out of ammo? Because the only thing he's doing during this part, when Spider-Man can't move because he can't let go of the cable car, and he also can't let go of MJ, right? So he's totally vulnerable, and the Goblin's just kind of socking him, And I'm like, use the machine guns.
And then a bunch of New Yorkers on the bridge start throwing shit at him, and they're like, get the fuck out of here!
Because this movie came out a year after 9/11.
Oh yeah, it's all rah New York.
So we really have to just show that the people of New York are banding together against someone blowing shit up in their city.
You fuck with this city, you fuck with all of us.
I would prefer if that was the line, but it still is. It's a fun moment.
It's fun.
I love the Goblin getting pelted with vegetables.
It's the Goblin crashes in another abandoned building that looks like it's in a horror movie.
Yeah. It's another very Evil Dead set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a bomb blows off part of.
So he does have grenades.
Yeah, he does.
Why was he fucking around?
Yeah, because
that's
that's how he blows off part of Peter's mask.
Why wasn't he using those at the bridge?
Don't know.
Anyway,
and there's another great reflection of the grenade exploding. Like Goblin throws the grenade, and then I think in Peter's actual eye, you see it split apart, and then a CGI explosion, and Peter turns his face toward the camera, and his mask rips off.
You know what I love about this explosion, and also this fight in general? Spider-Man, our hero, our superhero, gets the pulp beat out of him.
Yeah.
He bleeds. He is bleeding, not so much that we would have to up the rating of this movie, but he is bleeding a lot in this fight. When the grenade explodes, you see blood come out of his mouth. When he's kind of being pummeled by the Goblin, his lips are all bloodied. He's got blood on his arms and stuff. His the chest of his suit has been cut up and he's bleeding a little bit there. And I'm like, I love that we're first of all, trashing this superhero costume. I think it looks great all ripped up and shit. But I also love that it's no, these dudes are throwing down and both of them are getting hurt. It's not just two fucking invincible cartoons smashing into each other. like some of the Marvel movies that I have seen and not been super enamored with.
Yeah, that's what makes Spider-Man compelling is the moments when he's fighting a villain that he's vulnerable against.
Yeah.
And that humanity breaks through, and he's fighting a threat that is much bigger than guys robbing bodegas and snatching old ladies' purses.
Yeah.
That's what, especially because he is so young, that's where his heroism is really defined and where that comes through.
So there's like kind of the little part of this fight when the Goblin has the upper hand and he's really beating the tar out of Spider-Man. And then eventually the moment that the tables are turned is actually a fun one, because Goblin's going in for the kill.
Yeah.
He's done some fun stuff. At one point he like scissor kicks him in the chest and shit.
He's got like a spear
Yes.
now.
Yes. He has like
it's like a trident.
It's a spear that turns into a trident.
Yeah.
And then it's like electrified too, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But he basically is talking about MJ.
Yeah.
And he's like, I was gonna kill her quickly, but now that
You really pissed me off.
and that kind of gives Peter his second win.
Yeah.
And they exchange a few more blows and he starts gaining the upper hand, right? He shoots his webs and fucking brings a wall down on
just
top of the
drops
Green
a
Goblin.
wall on his head.
I love after he brings this wall down on the Goblin, he just grabs him, sets him up against a wall, throws a right hook, and then just does the same thing over and over. He's basically like, okay, we'll straighten you up, put you right up against the wall in my punching spot. Bam! Okay, let's do that again. Bam! And then Goblin transitions back to Norman mode, right? And is like, no, Peter, stop. Don't punch me again. And this is one of the best villain deaths in a children's movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was good enough to prevent me from seeing the movie at this age, according to my father.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Norman seems to come back and is trying to bargain with Peter, and he's like, Peter, the Goblin killed those people. You know, I would never do that. I'm your friend. As he's bringing up the glider behind him with his remote control on his wrist. And
I love the line, I was like a father
to
you, be a son to me now.
Yeah. And then Peter says, I had a father, his name was Ben Parker.
God damn.
Except he wasn't really your father, Peter, he was your uncle.
No,
okay?
but David,
you idiot.
He said, but David, he said earlier, I know I'm not your father. And Peter said, but stop pretending to be. And Cliff Robertson got so sad and hurt.
But he's not his father.
But he's his father. He's embracing
his
him
uncle.
as
Justus, he's his uncle.
It's the man who raised him, David. He's a fatherly presence in his life. He's accepting him as his impromptu father.
But that doesn't mean he's his father.
Well,
it means he's his uncle. And then Willem Dafoe goes, Godspeed, Spider-Man. And
yeah, and
shoots the glider at him. Spider-Man does a backflip, and then Willem Dafoe gets stabbed. And right before we get a close-up where he goes, oh, and then he gets fucking impaled on his own glider.
It looks like he's kind of impaled in the dick, by the way.
Yeah. He takes that glider straight to the nards.
Yeah. And once again, a bunch of blood coming out of Willem Dafoe's mouth here.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And he fucking dies. And then we get our couple of little denouement scenes in here. One is Spider-Man bringing in the dead body of Norman Osborn, like taking it back and putting it in his bed at home.
And Harry grabs the gun that's conveniently stashed in the side table for just such an occasion.
I think after Norman went Goblin mode, there were maybe just guns everywhere in the house all of a sudden. Like just every drawer suddenly has a gun in it. And Harry's been like, hey, Dad, what's up with all the guns? And he's like, oh, it's my new hobby.
Improperly storing your guns?
I've become something of a collector.
I'm something of a collector myself. Yeah, and so Harry basically swears a blood oath to kill Spider-Man.
Yeah. Because he sees that Spider-Man apparently killed his father for, I guess Harry thinks, no reason.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know that his dad was the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
So he's just like, yes, in addition to saving the city from crime, he apparently decided to start killing random. Well, I guess if you really think about it, this could be Spider-Man performing a public service if it was what Harry thought, and it was just him killing the CEO of a huge defense contracting company Because it's like, is that not in its own way an act of public good?
Sure.
If Spider-Man was just killing the guy running, Black Rock, would that be a bad thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Parody satire.
Parody satire for any NSA agents who are listening.
Anyway, and then the other kind of last scene here is we're at Norman Osborn's funeral.
Yeah.
And this is the moment where Mary Jane kind of finally
I
tells,
swear on my father's grave, one day Spider-Man will pay.
Yes, we get that.
Okay, Anakin.
We get that beautiful line reading from James Franco.
Jesus Christ. Not just the women, but the men, the children too. Okay.
I don't like sand. Yeah, I like that this movie ends on a bummer note. I like that it is a sad ending to a family-friendly comic book superhero movie, right? Where it's basically like, this is the thing I was talking about before. Being Spider-Man sucks, right? Because it's like he has what he wants, finally, what he's always wanted, which is the girl of his dreams who he's been in love with since he was 6 years old, right in front of him being like, hey, like, I love you too. Like, let's do this thing. And he has to be like, nope, can't. Because there might be a guy in a Power Ranger suit who drops you off a bridge again, and I don't want to be responsible for that. And it's the thing that I was talking about with his whole kind of being Spider-Man is an act of penance for a loved one who he let down. And I feel like this ending scene feels very earned, and the sadness of it feels like it hits you as sad, but also you understand it fully. Just because they set up all the stuff with Uncle Ben so well early in the movie.
And I know I've been pretty critical of MJ as a character. But I think this moment works to set up the moment in the second one where they do get together and you get that emotional payoff.
Yes, there is a big payoff on this in the second movie.
Yeah, so I think it's a nice way to end the movie.
Yeah. And I like him the little internal monologue, which is basically only at the beginning and end here. But him doing the whole, like, who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah.
And he's swinging around in New York. They had to CGI out the Twin Towers because they shot this before 9/11, and then that happens. And then we get Chad Kroeger from Nickelback singing us out.
Yeah.
And they say that a hero can save us. Not gonna stay here away.
It's funny that was from this movie.
Yes.
It's funny that we have Spider-Man to thank for that. Justus.
Yeah.
Is Spider-Man the greatest movie? Is Spider-Man the greatest movie ever made?
David. We talked about this movie for too long.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Hopefully we edited this episode a little bit so that people didn't just listen to us talk about Spider-Man for 3 hours.
I didn't expect us to talk about it for this long, but here we are.
Either. David, this movie was monumentally important to me as a boy, as a youth.
As a wee lad. I think that there are weaknesses in this movie when you watch it as a totally aware adult as opposed to a child. Some of the CGI doesn't hold up. Some of it looks like goofy PlayStation graphics. Some of the performances are maybe a little lackluster, even though I don't think Franco is as egregiously terrible as you do. I do not think he's good in this movie. Some of the dialogue is a little stilted, and I do agree with you that some of the latter half of this thing feels maybe a little rushed or a little tonally uneven, all that being said, it lived up to my memories of it in a pretty big way, and in a way that I kind of didn't necessarily expect it to, and I struggled with this verdict when I was writing my notes for this episode, because I found that my head was kind of feeling one way about it and my heart was kind of feeling another way about it. Yep, that's the struggle.
Where my head is basically like, is this the greatest movie ever made? Like, probably not. There's enough stuff for me to poke at and enough stuff that I was noticing in the moment that, like, intellectually, like, can I rationalize that decision? Not sure on this one. And then my heart is kind of being pulled in a different direction here, because I think this movie's really special. And I think the thing that is so powerful to me about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, not just this one, but the second one as well, and even to some degree the third one, is that he is simultaneously embracing the silliness and the camp and the ridiculousness of what it means to bring a comic book character to life, right? He brings this colorful, ridiculous world where a guy in a goblin mask and a guy in a full spandex red and blue outfit, flip around and punch each other. Like, it's goofy and silly, and it should be. And yet, he doesn't introduce any kind of like meta winkiness. We're laughing at how silly the concept is into this at all. It is played 100% completely straight. I think that this movie is honest with itself. It's honest with its audience. And because of that, it works phenomenally well on an emotional level for me. And I think because of that, I'm going to go with my heart on this one. And I'm going to say it's the greatest movie ever made, despite the like minor gripes that I have with it. Just because I think Raimi is a very earnest and inventive and heartfelt filmmaker. And I think that this is one of the best examples of that I've seen from him. And I think that's worth celebrating. So, greatest movie ever made. Sure. Why not? David. Feel like there might be a difference of opinion on this one, but I'll let you speak. Is Spider-Man 2002 the greatest movie ever made?
I feel like I've kind of played this with my cards close to my chest a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really having a hard time knowing how your overall feelings on this one went. But I think because you're being a little guarded, I'm like, he didn't like it. He fucking hates this movie.
I won't bullshit you. I'll just get straight to the point.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with this.
Yeah.
Had fun talking about it again.
Yeah.
At no point while watching this did I think this was the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah, and you know what? That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think because there's a lot to celebrate about this.
Yeah.
Like you said, I love this feels uniquely like a Raimi movie. It also, a lot of comic book movies from this time felt embarrassed to be comic book movies, right? And this doesn't. This fully embraces it. It embraces the camp. It embraces the goofiness. It embraces the melodrama. There are, I have mixed feelings about how well it does those things. And like you said, it never winks at you. It's never like kind of, modern superhero movies where everything is so weird and goofy that it's just kind of normal. And we have to make a joke to call attention to it, and it becomes really stale and boring and disposable. I don't feel that way with this one. But that all being said, I think everything this movie does is done better in the second one. And performance-wise, I come to this movie for Dafoe and J.K. Simmons, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And moreover, I think I've moved on from this movie.
Yeah, okay.
I think I've changed, and it's not a fault of the movie. I think as a film fan, my tastes in movies in general have changed. We've had 20 years of superhero movies since this one, so there are just, if I'm in a superhero mood, there are just other movies I'm going to go to before this one. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. This is a fine, fun, entertaining movie that had a big impact on me as a kid, and I'm happy to leave it back there in third grade. When it was my favorite movie that I had never seen.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah.
I am interested to go back to the second one.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try that third one again. I don't know. But I don't feel the need to go back to this one probably for a few more years.
Yeah. So David, we just a little bit of behind the scenes sausage making. I'm just gonna tell him it's fine.
Yeah.
We got to the part where we normally tell you what movie we're talking about next, dear listeners, and we realized we hadn't picked one.
I looked at our list and it was like, I don't know, and I picked something that wasn't even on the list. It was just the first movie that popped into my head.
Perfect, great. So before you tell me, just know, listeners, we paused the record, picked a movie, and now we're back to tell you what that is. So David, tell me, because you haven't even told me yet. What will we be talking about next week?
Stuart Gordon's Reanimator.
Oh, fuck yeah! Holy shit! All right. Maybe we should pick movies this way every time.
I don't know. It could be a fun way to do it.
No, we should probably plan this out.
Yeah,
better.
we should.
We're so good at this.
We're really great. Recording a 3.5-hour episode about Spider-Man, and
Yes.
we don't even know the next movie we're talking about. Join us next week for Stuart Gordon's Goop zombie horror comedy classic Reanimator.
Ooh, baby!
Starring the great Jeffrey Combs, the great Barbara Crampton.
The great Barbara Crampton. Holy shit.
In the meantime, talk about the show, tweet about the show, do that thing that Justus says at the end where you connect to an unsecured Bluetooth speaker. I want to hear a story about that.
Yeah,
Someone
do that.
should do that. And in the meantime, we hope you all do well. Sonora is here. You can probably hear her in the background. She hopes you do well as well. And we love you so much. As always, later dipshits.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.